We got Bede. Yep, cool. Yep. Great. Hey, welcome along, everyone, to our finance performance meeting for the day, the 23rd of October. Can we start by standing for our opening karakia, please? Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka. Thank you. Apologies, I've got a partial absence from Councillor Goff. Pauline is on Zoom, or will be on Zoom. She might be a bit late. The Mayor will be late as well. And I don't... Celeste's on Zoom. I don't know about Andre. I don't know if Andre... Oh, so we just won't... I don't know where Andre is. Yeah. No. Okay, so let's... so I'll move those. Jake's happy to second them. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Then we'll go declarations of interest. So they're noted there around items 12, 13, 14 and 15. They're really for the CCOs and yeah, they are just CCOs. The previous minutes, I'm happy to move them. Mel's happy to second them. Is there anything on those? All in favour? That's great. That's carried. Oh, Andrew's here. Cool. Public forum. So have I got David Lynch here? Okay. Have I got Troy Hall here? Okay, we might skip that and we'll come to our first deputation, which is John Minto. I think I saw John. Welcome, John. Come on up. And this is in relation to item 7.
We'll be sitting down in a minute.
Enga mana, enga reo, enga mana whenua o tēnei rohi, enga hoe whā. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. Yeah, greetings everybody, and thank you very much to councillors for the opportunity to come and speak this morning about the item that's coming up on the agenda in relation to the Council adopting a policy lined up with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334. This Resolution 2334 was co-sponsored at the United Nations Security Council by the New Zealand Government in 2016 when Bill English was the Prime Minister and Murray McCully was Minister of Foreign Affairs. And through this resolution, the United Nations Security Council stated that in the occupied Palestinian territories, Israeli settlements had, quote, no legal validity and constituted a flagrant violation under international law. It said they were a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. The resolution goes on and calls on countries to distinguish between the land of the State of Israel and the land it occupied from 1967. And to assist with this, the United Nations Human Rights Council was asked to create a database of companies complicit in building and maintaining illegal Israeli settlements. The companies concerned are listed in the notes for this resolution on your agenda. So the current Aotearoa New Zealand government supports this UN Security Council Resolution 2334, as do all opposition parties. In other words, it's a bipartisan approach from our politicians. So why does this matter now? Well, it matters now because in December 2022, Israel elected its most extreme ethno-nationalist government ever, and as well as stepping up the brutal repression of Palestinians, they also made clear they will not negotiate peace with Palestinians. They will not negotiate for the formation of a Palestinian state. Instead, they said their top priority is to push ahead with more illegal Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian land. In the last week of June 2023, Israel's leaders announced plans to build more than 5,000 additional houses in these illegal settlements. And today, as we sit here in this room, Palestinians are being driven off their land by Israeli settler gangs that have been emboldened by the genocidal rhetoric of Israeli leaders. So the expansion of these illegal settlements and the failure of Western governments to hold Israel to account is one of the reasons Palestinian resistance groups made up what could be called a prison break on October the 7th last year, and resistance fighters attacked and overran 6 Israeli military bases. And as we know, the past year has seen many war crimes committed, including the crimes of genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, collective punishment, wholesale killing of civilians and destruction of civilian infrastructure, schools, universities, etc., starvation being used as a weapon of war, and the denial of humanitarian aid. All of these crimes should be investigated and prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. Today, Israel is running riot across the Middle East because it has never been held to account for 76 years of flagrant breaches of international law. What is happening now in northern Gaza is the starvation and industrial-scale slaughter of Palestinian civilians as Israel tries to drive them out and seize the land through ethnic cleansing. Palestinians have appealed to the world to support their struggle with non-violent pressure through BDS, that's boycotts, divestment and sanctions. This is the same request as made by black South Africans struggling against South Africa's apartheid policies last century. It's important to say here that every credible human rights group, groups such as Al-Haq, B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have all declared Israel to be an apartheid state. B'Tselem, for example, Israel's largest and most respected human rights organisation, describes Israel as, quote, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. They say this is apartheid. So we're urging our mayor and city councillors today to take a small but significant step in sanctioning Israel in line with the United Nations resolution, for which, as I said earlier, there is bipartisan support from our politicians. We're very pleased to say that Environment Canterbury passed a similar motion early this year. But if this motion passes today, Christchurch will be the first city in New Zealand to end Israeli impunity for war crimes. And I say that because building settlements on occupied land that belongs to someone else is illegal under international law. It is a war crime under international law. And that vote at ECAN earlier this year was 14 votes in favour and 2 against. And I'm hoping today that the vote will be 16 votes in favour and no votes against. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, John, for that. And can I just remind the gallery, it is respectful for everyone if we can just remain silent while people are speaking. Does anyone have any questions for John? Sorry.
That's
you
fine.
Go for it.
Tēnā koutou katoa, dear people's representatives and members of the City Council. My name is Josephine Varghese. I am a lecturer at University of Canterbury. I focus on studies of imperialism, peace and conflict. 6 Palestinians were among the 51 killed in Christchurch mosque attacks. The gruesome mosque terror attacks on March 15 were rightly described as one of the darkest days, not only in the cities, but in Aotearoa, New Zealand's history. On that day and for the weeks and months that followed, we came together in solidarity, pledging to never allow that kind of violence to occur on civilians again. We refused to other the members of our Otutahi Palestinian and Muslim communities affected. They are us, we said. This is the moment to uphold our commitment that we made on March 15 to the well-being and the protection of the loved ones of the members in our community. Christchurch got this title of Peace City in the year 2002 in recognition of the city's long-standing commitment and efforts towards peace and justice, not only in our corner of the world, but internationally. This tradition is over 100 years old. starting in the early 20th century when working class men and women of the city protested the inter-imperialist war and against the compulsory conscription. Among them was Ada Wells, the first female city councillor of Christchurch. And today is an opportunity for all of you to walk in the footsteps of giants like Ada Wells and like Elsie Locke, to take a stand in favor of peace. Respected council members, 85% of schools, 100% of universities, and 100% of the hospitals in Gaza have been damaged or completely destroyed by this onslaught. The figure of deaths is at 44,000, of which at least 15,000 are children. Boycotting products and services which support and benefit from colonization and apartheid is the long-standing peaceful means of protest adopted by freedom fighters across the world, not only by Black South Africans against apartheid, but also in the Indian independence struggle by the likes of Gandhi. This is a rare opportunity for us to follow in the footsteps of these greats and make a historic move, not only for Christchurch City, but also for Aotearoa, New Zealand. On March 15, 2019, we made headlines for all the wrong reasons. And today could be an opportunity where we make headlines globally for the right reasons. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you both very much. And sorry I cut you off. I didn't realise you were speaking as well, so that's fantastic. We've got 45 seconds. Aaron?
Yeah, John, did you say that October 7th was only an attack on military bases in Israel?
No, I didn't say that. No.
Oh, okay, that's all right. I just thought you might have. But you didn't mention the atrocities of October 7th, which triggered this
I've mentioned the war crimes that committed on October the 7th and since then. All war crimes should be investigated. And we've been very clear.
By all sides?
By all sides,
Cool.
Absolutely.
Just double checking.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Look, thank you both very much for that deputation.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
so
you.
next up, we've got Ben. I want to say Kips. Ben, hopefully I've said that correctly. And Ben is on Zoom, speaking about item 7 as well. So Ben, we'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no worries. Yep.
Awesome. Kia ora te whānau. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I can't be there today. It was highly offensive to hear the previous speaker characterise October 7th as a prison
Sorry,
break.
Ben, can I just stop? What I'm not going to have today is people talking about other deputations, just given the sensitivity. So if you can keep it to your points, that would be great.
Absolutely. So context there that on October 7th, mass rape, hostage taking and beheading occurred. But that's not actually what we're here to discuss today. What we're here to discuss is this motion around BDS. So thank you for your time today. I stand before you, albeit virtually, as a spokesperson for the New Zealand Jewish Council, local entrepreneur, professional board member, but perhaps most poignantly, the son of refugees who are themselves Holocaust survivors. I urge you not to enforce this flawed and unworkable policy which singles out Israel through the boycott, divestment and sanctions or BDS movement. The BDS movement against Israel is both impractical and unjust for several reasons. Israel is deeply integrated into the global economy, especially in areas like technology, agriculture and medicine. Cancer treatments, ubiquitous GPS tools and irrigation systems, all used here in Otautahi, Christchurch, have their origins in full or in part in Israel. Boycotting Israel's technological and economic contributions would be highly impractical. Even those who sympathise with the political goals of BDS find it extremely difficult to maintain a boycott when confronted with the reality of global supply chains and the reliance on Israeli products. Secondly, BDS unfairly singles out Israel while ignoring the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the broader Middle Eastern geopolitical landscape. Israel is the only democracy in the region. A country that upholds the rule of law, has a free press and guarantees civil liberties to all its citizens. Israel is also one of the few countries in the region that protects the rights of the LGBTQ+ community. It recognises same-sex marriages, something absolutely unimaginable in many neighbouring countries, where basic civil rights are often denied. Yet BDS focuses solely on Israel, ignoring that Israel is unique in a region dominated by authoritarian regimes. Many of Israel's neighbours impose severe restrictions on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, gender equality and human rights. However, these regimes escape the scrutiny of BDS, which paints Israel as an authoritarian regime. This mischaracterization is not only unjust, but also misleading. It oversimplifies a deeply complex conflict, and by doing so, it undermines the possibility of a balanced and fair resolution. Moreover, BDS doesn't just target the Israeli government or specific policies. It extends its reach to private citizens, businesses, academic institutions, and cultural entities. This broad scope has led to accusations of a collective punishment. The movement harms ordinary Israelis who may oppose certain government policies or actively work for peace. By isolating all Israelis, BDS discourages collaboration between Israelis and Palestinians, stifling opportunities for joint ventures that could foster greater understanding and cooperation. Furthermore, the BDS movement has often been criticised for fostering anti-Semitism, even if this is not always the explicit intention. By calling for blanket boycotts of all Israeli entities, the movement sometimes crosses a line where legitimate criticism of government policies becomes indistinguishable from hostility towards Jewish communities worldwide. We have seen, even ourselves here in Christchurch, instances where Jewish individuals and institutions outside of Israel have been targeted as a result of BDS actions, even when they have no direct connection to the Israeli government. This broadening of hostility not only fuels anti-Semitism, but also risks polarising communities and undermining efforts to promote peace. When it comes to procurement decisions, those decisions should be based on clear, consistent, and fair approaches. These decisions should be designed to balance risk, return, and ethical considerations based on objective guidelines. Cherry-picking certain geopolitical issues or focusing on specific countries while ignoring others not only undermines the integrity of these investment frameworks, but also politicises financial decisions in an unhelpful way. For example, many councils and organisations that support BDS have not taken similar positions on other global issues, such as the conflicts in Ukraine or the Congo, or the plight of the Uyghurs. Even closer to Israel, in Syria, Assad has killed hundreds of thousands of his own countrymen, but councils don't take umbrage with that. Singling out Israel while ignoring other troubling actions in other nations exposes an inconsistency in applying moral and ethical principles. If the Council chooses to take a stand on Israel but remains silent on other pressing international issues, it risks being perceived as selective in its outrage, which can undermine its credibility and make its actions appear politically motivated rather than grounded in consistent ethical values. Rather than promoting peace, BDS deepens divisions. A more constructive approach would be to encourage dialogue, cooperation and mutual understanding between Israelis and Palestinians, recognising the complexities of the conflict and the shared humanity of both sides. I urge you not to go down the BDS rabbit hole. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that. And I've got a question from Tyler.
Kia ora, Ben. Shalom. Thank you so much for coming in. I just wanted to ask a question based on your statement on risk, return and ethical situations. And what we noticed within the deputation, which was quite substantial, thank you for that, is you do realise that this item that we're voting on today is only regarding the illegal occupation as based in the UN 2334, not Israeli companies within Israel.
Yeah, I do, but the UN resolution has a pretty broad brush application, and if you look at the list of companies that are mentioned there, it is very broad. So I would argue that it's far broader than simply the illegal occupations, and its impact is much broader than just that.
Can you hone in on that broad part, Ben, just so I can gain some understanding?
Yeah, so as I sort of mentioned in my submission, there's a lot of organisations, a lot of individuals that are striving for peace, that are working to collaborate alongside with Palestinians. Many of them are involved in the organisations that are listed in the UN resolution in that list. And so a broad brush approach that boycotts those organisations can actually impact on their abilities to partner and collaborate in striving for peace with their Palestinian brothers.
Those are those are interesting statements. I really thank you for that. But what we're talking about is the occupation of the West Bank and Jerusalem more specifically. So in that statement, are you saying to vote down all of the item that stands?
I'm saying that BDS is a flawed approach, and I would urge the council to not follow the BDS.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben, for that. Appreciate your time and making the effort. So now, is Victoria here? Great. Victoria, do you want to come on down? You might just have to lead her through, please, team. Great, welcome along. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So I just have a short and sweet thing that I've written. I was informed of, I guess, this policy proposal just yesterday. I'm not nearly as informed as Keeps is, but I'll try my best to say my mind as a member of the Jewish community. So, kia ora, shalom, and добрый день to the councillors of Otautahi. I would like to ask the councillors why they intend to take a position on the illegal occupation of the West Bank when they have never outwardly taken a position on the illegally occupied land taken from Māori during the land wars, or any other countries in the world. I would also like to ask the councillors why they intend to follow this particular UN recommendation when they do not uphold other UN recommendations, such as UNDRIP, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UN 2030 Agenda, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and many other United Nations-aligned guidelines and proposals. As a person who has Ukrainian family members who have come to Aotearoa on the special Ukraine visa, I ask why the councillors are entertaining a performative motion that does not help any Palestinian, and instead of using your position to pressure our central government into establishing a special Palestinian territory visa. You yourselves have stated in the agenda that the Christchurch City Council does not currently do business with any organizations included on the United Nations Human Rights Council's list, after all. I believe this item is not only a waste of ratepayer money, a waste of citizen and councillor time, but is also a giant bureaucratic burden, as your own agenda states. Exemption being approved by the chief executive will override this policy. Thank you for listening to my points.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for coming in and making that short and sweet. I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? No? Great. Hey, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That. Okay, so now I do see Mr. David Lynch in the audience, and we'll move back to public forum. So David and Troy, would you like to come up, please? Now they've got 10 minutes. I don't know how you want to do it, David. Do you want to do it?
We'll do it jointly.
Jointly? Great, 10 minutes. And now there's a handout that Megan's going to pass around as well. Great. Welcome along. Welcome.
And
Troy.
thank you very much for adjusting the timetable. We appreciate that. I'm joined by Troy Hall. Perhaps if I give some explanation about Troy. He's been in Christchurch as of yesterday to launch his advocacy program as a survivor of a traumatic event. 13 years ago, he was fighting for his life in a hospital bed with 60% burns to his body, unable to move or talk at 22 years of age in 2011. He had been electrocuted twice by 110,000 volt lines whilst picking avocados for work in an orchard in Taronga in wet conditions, and he was in the cherry picker, and it was October the 14th of October when his life changed dramatically. He shouldn't, in theory, be here. He is a survivor, and he's committed in many respects in trying to ensure our young folks, irrespective of whether they've gone through a traumatic event such as he has, understands the position you face in a very deep hole in life. You find your way out, and Troy is trying to advocate around that. Turning to my address today and why we're here, I think it's important to acknowledge the Finance Committee is doing a superb job as the councillors in rebuilding the city, but very much in our view, much of it is focused on obviously the physical elements, which are very important. We've got to get the buildings up, we've got to get business and economy running. But we do wonder from time to time whether the people of our city, particularly the young folks, are sort of left behind in some way. So our joint public forum presentation will focus on the role the City Council can have in advocating for enhanced policies supporting the health, safety and well-being of Christchurch citizens, particularly the younger generations who continue, in our view, to face the lasting effects of the multiple traumatic events over the past decade. We're particularly concerned about the central government's possible and insufficient attention to the needs of younger citizens who have experienced traumatic events. What we think isn't happening is there isn't enough auditing done to make sure that these young folks are falling through the gaps and not being supported. So we're particularly concerned about that. We acknowledge that this falls outside the direct responsibilities of this council, but we believe you can be a strong voice to Wellington in advocating, at the very least, for a review to be done to make sure that these young folks, my own daughter of 8 grew up with the earthquake and joined university at the start of the COVID. They've been impacted, and we think that not enough is done to support them, particularly through health. The key issues facing the younger generation, we believe, as I've said, the Canterbury earthquakes, the mosque attacks, and of course the impact of COVID. So our call to action to you today, through the City Council, as we've said, you're not directly involved in delivering mental health services, but we would argue that the Council has this crucial role to play in advocacy, and we would encourage you to do that, and we would encourage you to work with Troy and myself in understanding how you can be effective in respect of that. We've indicated what we think the Council could look at, but again, we're not the experts, and no doubt your staff will have some views on this, but certainly we think the area of funding needs to be looked at. We think there's a lot of wastage, and we think that a lot of that wastage should be directed more in the areas of concern to us. I won't really go through everything that I've detailed, because I now think it's important that, in summarising, as I said, we believe, the physical scars of many young people in Christchurch, they still carry them, and we urge the City Council to take a proactive stance by advocating for strong policies and comprehensive support from central government to ensure these individuals are being looked after. I would now like to introduce you to Troy, who will just provide a few comments about where he's come from and his view on this matter. Thank you, Troy.
No pressure, eh? But thanks, guys, for having me today. I really do support what David's talking about. Me personally going through what I've been through has been a really dark and long journey for me, but I've realised nowadays that I could be an advocate for mental health, and the things that David has been saying is something that I agree with a lot. It might not be physical challenges that they're facing, but the mental, and a lot of people can understand, and even people that have come from other countries, other places of trauma. I believe it's something that really needs to be, attention needs to be focused on that. We all go through adversities, we all go through a lot of, times of traumatic experiences, so there are people out there that are, how would you say, in a silence, how would you explain it? They're silently fighting the battle of what's happened to them. David gave me some examples of people that are going through that, even a bus running through and shaking the area, that sort of really creates that trauma. It's like a trigger. So I believe in that too, because there's a lot of triggers that I still have with the experiences that I've been through. So me personally, I feel that it is important to at least get awareness out there that there is help for these people. I just keep it short and sweet, to be fair, but it's enough for me to understand that I do acknowledge what David is saying, and wherever I can help possible as well in that sense, I would love to sort of be a part of it. So it's about it for me.
I think we need to reiterate, this is not a criticism of this council,
No.
and it's certainly not a criticism of the government. We just think that someone needs to pause for a moment and ask, what's happened over the last decade in the city? Are our young adults, the future of this city and the future of this country, are they being well provided for, or are they silently suffering? And we think that there are many. I should say that in presenting this presentation today, I have spoken in confidence with many medical professionals and they were nervous, should I say, in speaking publicly. They know that I'm not nervous in speaking publicly when it comes to advocating on these matters. And so that's why we're here today, as well as addressing you. We also will be obviously talking to our colleagues in Wellington, the various ministers, but again, we would encourage you to think about this, and we're here to work with you if you wish to take up our challenge. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both very much for coming. Good question. Yeah, Kelly's got it. Thank you both, David and Troy, for coming in, and welcome, Troy.
Thank you.
Kelly has a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for sharing, Troy. I just wondered if you could maybe outline just the one thing that made a real difference to you in improving your mental health after going through what you went through. Was it, were there people, who were open to listening to your story and helping you out there? Just curious to know.
A lot of it's to do with attitude. That's my main sort of how would you call it? Sort of the main motto of my presentations that I do around companies, corporates, and all that sort of stuff is that attitude is everything. When you have the right attitude, you're going to look at things in a better perspective, being grateful for things. It's very hard to do that at the best of times, especially in my situation, but the more grateful you can become and having good routine, good environments and everything around you, because I came from a cultural background of gangs and violence, drugs and alcohol, so I know both ends of the spectrum. Nowadays, I realise that, as much as I love my brothers on the other side, I realise that they're still doing the same old things. So it's not a good path to go down. And they're still doing the same old things from teenage years where I was as well. So I believe environment is important. I believe attitude as well, gratitude, just being grateful for the little things, to be fair, because a lot of the world, they're really struggling out there, and it's really difficult to, we live in a world, we're in a beautiful country at this stage in time, we've got all the things that a lot of people don't. So that alone should be enough for our youth, especially in New Zealand. They should look at that, especially, being grateful for all the little things. Yeah, so.
Great. Hey, well, thank you both.
Can I just start, since we've got, I think, a few minutes, just one final point I should have mentioned.
Minute, David.
No, thank you. Many people have asked us why Troy selected Christchurch to launch his campaign yesterday. Troy felt strong connection with Christchurch because, obviously, the earthquake was in 2011 and some months later, of course, his tragedy. He wants to acknowledge the 185 people that died that day, but also wants to bring some attention to the nearly 7,000 that were treated for various injuries, 220 roughly, of major trauma. And whilst he's been in Christchurch, we are reaching out to some of those people so that Troy can share his experiences, hopefully together, and these people can find their way forward on their journey of recovery. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Brilliant. Hey, we have no petitions, David, do we? No, great. So we'll come to the first staff report, which is item 7. Is Luke here? Oh, Luke is here. Great. Come on up, Beatty. You're going to sit here.
Yeah, I'll sit here unless you want me to.
No, that's fine.
Kia ora koutou. How you doing? So just to summarise this report effectively, it notes the US resolution relating to the occupied territories in Palestine, which New Zealand was a co-sponsor. It notes the advice from MFAT. We also contacted Auditor General. Essentially, it's a policy decision for Council, but the staff recommendation is essentially not to contract with the UN list unless there's exceptional circumstances with the approval from the CE. And also, we're not currently doing business with anyone on the list. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you for that. That's we'll take the paper as read. So I appreciate your introduction. You wanting to move it by the looks of it? Yeah. I just want to. Have we got a second? Okay, Sarah. Yep. So Tyler and Sarah. Yep. You got a question?
Yeah. A couple of easy ones. Heads up. So Victoria gave a deputation and talked about this very clause, which is 6A, particularly around the last sentence. Can you just let everyone know around what an exceptional circumstance might entail?
Yep. So any specific circumstance would be considered with the specifics of the event in question, the nature of the actual requirement. But in a broad sense, it would be something aligned with a health and safety issue or a business critical service, something along those lines.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in short, it's just whether it's a monopoly company that we need
As an example
essential works
of the type of thing that would...
Okay,
and the
that's
likelihood of that is very low, right?
Yeah.
I would, well, on the basis that we're not
I don't know.
currently contracting with any of them
Yeah.
on the list, then yeah, I would say the likelihood is on the
BAU,
lower side.
easy as. Yeah, cool.
great. So that's been moved in
with that.
Melanie and then Tim.
I'm sorry, this was in regard to Victoria's comments as well, because she mentioned a number of other things like the UN 2030 agenda and things, and said council's not following those. But can you comment on that? Is that true?
That we're not...
Yeah, I didn't catch your whole list, sorry, but
Yeah.
I understand that we are for some of them. So I was wondering if anyone can comment on that, just to clarify.
We might need to probably hard for you to respond to it, so we could report back on that list. We'll check what the list was, because we'll listen back on the tape
Just bring back
and
some information.
provide a memo
Yeah.
or update or something.
Okay, and then Tim, and then we'll...
Thank you. Just looking at the attachment B and A, so we've got, say, 4 companies there that kind of, Airbnb, Booking.com, JCB, and TripAdvisor, but they are itemised as Airbnb United States, Booking.com Netherlands, JCB United Nations, TripAdvisor United States. Is that itemising them so it's not global?
That's how I understood it. So in a simple sense, what we did was look at our financial system and the names of the companies and whether they were these companies, and none of them were.
So it's not Airbnb global. So
no, that's not how I mean, Bede, I don't know if you want to jump in there, but how I understand it.
Yeah, we were, some of these companies are subsidiaries of other companies. So as Luke has said, through you, Mr. Chair, we've taken it that these are these specific companies that have been named, and not necessarily, if you take Airbnb, I think they say Airbnb United States. We've taken it as United States, not the UK or whatever.
Yeah.
That's how we've read it.
And just to be very clear, we have not compiled this list. This is a UN
yes,
list.
yep.
So that's how we've interpreted it through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Okay. So this. Okay. It's
Aaron.
Thank you.
Well, there seems to be a lack of clarity around something we're voting on, which is a little bit alarming, but I took it to mean that these companies have a relationship with parts of Israel / the occupied territories, and that's why they're on the list, because if you go into Airbnb, you can do business with so on and so forth. That's why they're on the list, not because otherwise you could put every company in the world on this list if they're not in Israel or occupied territories. I think we should really have clarification before we're voting.
No, that's not...
The council doesn't have... We don't have Airbnb properties, so of course we don't do business. But Airbnb does a lot of business in Christchurch and New Zealand.
So do you want to just be really clear on the question, and we'll just see if the team can...
Can we get a really clear answer on what all of these companies actually mean and their definition?
So my understanding was from Mary said, we haven't generated a list. This is based off the UN resolution.
But this is a list that we're about to vote on.
Correct.
Should we not know what we're voting on?
We're voting on
Because
the
I've heard
list
3
from the
different
UN.
questions from the floor, not
Well, okay,
clearly known.
so let's not. I don't want to debate it with you by question. So ask your question, and then I'll see if the team can answer.
So Airbnb being on this list, I'll just use them because they're at the top. What does that mean?
Well, what it would mean is that if we were going to go and use Airbnb as a provider, we would, and we don't currently, we would have to ascertain whether that Airbnb United States, whether that was a provider to council. So we would look at, if we were looking, for instance, at procuring our accommodation arrangements, and we went out and asked, can you please, we've got an expression of interest, or requests for proposals, we would go and ask, we would then look at that list and determine whether or not Airbnb United States, as characterised on that list, was or was not one of the providers. And we can't determine that in advance. We can only determine that when we actually ask for a procurement exercise to be undertaken.
Okay, I'll be slightly clear on the question. Does the listing here, when it says Airbnb, does that, when it says United States, does that not mean that's its parent company is there, just like Booking.com, its parent company is the Netherlands?
So we did have occasion to, through you, Mr. Chair, we did have occasion to explore that and did realise that sometimes they are talking about the parent and sometimes they are talking about a subsidiary. So we would need to know specifically once we sent out a procurement, if we asked for a list of companies or procured for some activity, it's only when we got that in and saw exactly who was on it could we go and match it off against the list and determine whether Airbnb United States is referring to the United States of Airbnb or whether it's referring to it globally. We haven't undertaken that exercise yet because we're not procuring with them.
Given that we've been given a list of companies there that we're voting on, should we not be clear on what this list means?
Through you, I think.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
I can see that it's very clear on the website around.
Do you want to just turn your mic on, Mary? Sorry. Yeah.
So it's the supply of equipment and materials facilitating the construction and expansion of settlements and the wall associated with infrastructure. So this is in occupied Palestine territories, including East Jerusalem. It's a supply of surveillance and identification equipment for the settlements. It's a supply of equipment for the demolition of housing and property and the destruction of agricultural farms, greenhouse, olive groves, etc. It's a supply of security services and equipment, the provision of services and utilities supporting the maintenance and existence of settlements, including transport, banking, financial. So it's very, I can go, I won't take the rest of the meeting ring through the list. It's very much companies that are associated with the East occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem.
And,
so they have to be active in those activities there. It's not just any old business.
Yeah.
It's very specific.
And just to be clear, these are companies that we currently don't use. Yeah.
No, we don't. No, at present, so we've done them through you. We don't use any of these companies at present. Correct.
Okay. Have you got another?
I can send you
Yeah,
another
but
one.
what we're voting on today, just to be clear, is that we will not do business with any of these in the future without special delegation or a bending of the rules, is what we mean.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is Airbnb United States, which is the home parent land, but obviously they've done something over there which gets them on this list.
Yep.
Is that everyone's correct understanding?
Yes. So through you,
We
Mr.
didn't compile the list.
No, we didn't
It's
compile the list.
Yeah.
The list was compiled.
But we are voting on the list.
Correct. We are. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're voting on a procurement policy change, which is reflective of what has come from UN Security Council Resolution 2334. So that's, I mean, I'm not, I completely get your point. I'm just not sure there's much more we can get out of questions in that respect. I think the team have been pretty clear.
Yeah, and it would be good, that other list that was raised, because I know that it's been raised, and Philip Haythorne-Thwaites has raised it for more than a decade, where we're not honouring UN obligations. So it would be good to see that entire list, because we might as well do the whole lot, including everyone that's riding e-bikes with cobalt from the Congo.
Yep. So Mary's going to bring back some advice on, or a memo.
For that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So I think we're there. So we've got a mover and a seconder. Does anyone want to debate this? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Aye. Against?
No.
So we'll note Aaron and Kelly. Any abstentions? So we've got James, Kelly, and Mark abstained. And me. Sorry, not Kelly. Vic. Great. So that is carried. Thank you, Luke, for that. now on to the exciting stuff for the meeting. Peter Ryan, come on up. Now we might just. Do you want to just wait a minute? I don't know if anyone's gonna. If anyone's planning to leave, can you leave before we start the paper, just so we can give Peter the respect he needs?
I'd recommend hanging around for our key organisational performance results. Interesting.
Sorry, I wasn't across. I've just texted you. I was just. Google the question. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. I want to get started.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Look, this is to do with our goals around delivering the LTP. Headline, things looking up, but there are a couple of things to watch as well. And I also have some responses for councillors from questions last time. And we've got staff in the room to answer those questions further if needed. Okay, so from the top, levels of service delivery, we've had a sharp upswing, about 4%. That reflects a lot of focus from the various management teams. We're just shy of where we would like to be, but it shows a very positive trend upwards. I'll come back to the answers on service delivery exceptions. There's one there for Councillor Johansson and a couple of others. I'll circle back to those after we get through the headline results.
I don't think they're clapping for you, Pete, but carry on. I was, though, don't worry. It's fine. Look, okay.
A man, surely a man can dream. Capital project delivery, steady, very slightly below where we want to be. That's actual delivery, not spend, but pretty much right where we want to be. Capital planning, I'd say on track. It's flagged amber, but it's a long way from now till March and June, and all trends from previous years show where we are now is where we need to be. That should be okay. Activity budgets, there's a slight decline, and I'll circle back there, but we've got two activities that are forecasting overspend or significant overspend, and that's probably the area we need to watch. There'll be more information there in the finance report. And of course, delivering capital program to budget, we're steady at about 37 million below as a year-end result. So I would like to just note, and it's a bit unusual, there's one level of service change, and that's for Parakiore. Mr. Chair, I believe there might be a question.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right. Look, it's public knowledge what's happening there. We do like our targets to be achievable. If we know that a target is simply not, it becomes a very dull exercise to keep banging on the door when we know it's shut. The proposal there is to remove Parakiore from the current year's targets, acknowledge that change in the annual report, and then reinstate it next year when it actually becomes a possibility. So I'd just like the committee to note that. Otherwise, it becomes a pointless and repetitive exercise. Over on page 3 of the report, which is the scatter diagram, the bubble diagram, as I said to you in previous meetings, we focus on outliers. At the start of the year, everything is more or less in the sweet spot. The drift there is more or less around stormwater and wastewater. Now, there are reasons for that, but we do like to keep an eye on those things. In total, that's about 4 million between the two activities. And as I said, there'll be more information. This is the headline stuff. There'll be more information in the finance report on why that's occurring and what steps are being taken. There was also, as I said, some questions from councillors. One of them was on Atakaro Avon River corridor from Councillor Harrison Hunt and Henstock. The response, we've got Rupert here to go if there's any need for more detail, but briefly the response is, yes, there was a low level of service response in the last report. That's since been bridged by Parks, 3 Waters and Transport, and the result has jumped from 29 up to 86%. So there's some confidence there that those things are being done. I'm not really sure if there's a need to really go beyond that, but if it turns out there are questions, Rupert's here for the detail. In terms of water supply, question from Councillor Johansson on data, trends and clarifications on when things will be available. The bottom line there is that data is available from September onwards and it will be in future reports. The trends are there in 6.3.4 over time, and water metering and charging will not be impacted. We do have Gavin here if there's further information required, but that's the headline response. Building regulation, again from Councillor Harrison Hunt. Stefan can't be here, but essentially there were 5 levels of service that were not on target. 2 of them have since come right. The answer on contractors is that yes, there are some contractors involved. They are used sparingly because they do come at an additional cost. I don't have a quantification of that, but that is the case. So essentially this is a demand-driven problem where we're using contractors to try to deal with the issue, bearing in mind that building staff are specialist and hard to obtain across the country. And lastly, a question from Councillor Hanson on stormwater drainage and asset management. And essentially the bottom line of that is that there will be a briefing 26th of February next year, followed by a full overall maturity assessment plan for the 2026 year. David and Paul McCaffrey can't be here for that, but I can take any further requests for information back to them. So they're the big 4 questions from the last session. Other than that, there's no need to really dwell on line by line. That's the headline material. Any particular information you need around capital or finance is in the following detailed reports.
Great. Thank you, Peter, for that. Really, really good report to read. Tyler and then Yanni.
Kia ora, Peter. I'm probably going to have to go straight to the consenting team. But the thing that got raised to me last week was particularly around the use of consultants outside of the city. And just for clarity's purpose, if there is a consultant that usually works in Auckland and they do some work in Christchurch, are the bylaws around building consenting different in each city? It might sound like a silly question, but
I think we've got Mr. Higgins here.
I can answer that. No, they're not different.
Okay.
There are some specific requirements to Christchurch, such as wind, various things like that. However, the Building Act is the same across the country and the Building Code is the same across the country.
Okay, so around those scopes, would it then take extra time to understand the bespoke parts of Christchurch if they were coming from outside of the city?
Generally not. They just might have to apply some different requirements, but they should be pretty familiar with doing that.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks. And if I can get those levels of service that weren't, those 5 that weren't delivered, you can just email them to me, that's fine.
Okay. No
Super
problem.
interested in that. Thanks.
Yeah, and possibly a question for Gavin around the water. So I was just trying to understand. So we introduced excess water charges to try and reduce the amount of water people were using, but a trend has been that actually people are using more litres per resident per day. So it's increased. So can I just get an understanding of why that's the case and what
the excess water charge is really focused around reducing peak demands during summer. So the water usage looks over the whole year. So we can the excess water was targeted for those peak periods to reduce demand on the network.
Right. So are we seeing a reduction? Like what? I'm just wondering how. Is there another way we can get the information that shows what's happening around what we're trying to achieve with the excess water charging? Because if you just read this as a headline, it looks bad. But if there's been the benefits around reducing the peak demand in terms of water consumption, then that's obviously a good thing, right? But is there anything else that we're looking at in terms of water conservation or trying to meet that target outside of the excess water charges? It still seems weird to me that we would.
You've asked Yanni, let him speak.
There was a briefing in the last 6 months where we show the benefits of the excess water charging, which focused around the reducing the peak demand, which reduces the needs for upgrades of pump stations and pipelines. You're talking about the overall demand across the city. There are no other streams of work to reduce that currently.
Right. And, I know in our water strategy, we talk about looking at rainwater collection tanks. Is there any work going on in that space? Or reuse of grey water?
Not within 3 waters, no.
Okay, Mel.
With the excess water charging, though, aren't we picking up heaps of private leaks? I've heard of quite a few people who have had bills and then they find, the mayor's an example, but I've heard of other ones as well.
Yes.
And they're getting picked up, and then once they're gone and they're watering gardens or even community gardens next door, they're not over the threshold. So, yeah, it's serving other purposes, is what I'm saying, isn't it? Yeah.
But sorry.
No, I don't want to debate excess water charges.
I don't want to debate it. I just wanted to understand.
I've got a list of questions, so I'll come back to you, Yanni. Okay. Mark.
Thank you. Just looking at the list there on page 29, and transport seems to stick out with a service delivery percentage of 48. Is there an explanation for that?
I think the answer to that is complex because there's more than one level of service involved. I'd probably prefer to come back with a properly integrated response than just go off the hip, especially since it's Lynette's activity. But what I can say is that we do the same thing in the next report, come back to you with a response, break down what the key elements are in a short space.
Thank you, that's good.
Yeah, great. Yanni.
Sorry, just trying to understand if we've got any information as to why the trend is going up in terms of the water use.
I don't have the information available here. I can speak to the staff and see what we can find out.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Just to be fair, the trend went down and then up. So it's a more nuanced picture than gone up.
So I think maybe, Peter, if it's okay, can we just get like you've done with the questions that have come up today, can we just take that away and add it to the list for next month? I think it's quite a good approach. And then it means that your requests get captured. Yeah,
sorry, just on the 6.34, we went from 261 litres per resident per day average in June 2023, 261, 2024, 298 litres.
Yeah, so I think really good point. Okay. Well, let's pick it up and bring it
just back. The only other question I had, which is we're getting lots of data now from where complaints come in. And I know that I'm just wondering, I was just thinking of that Church Corner intersection discussion that we had where people have said, there's a whole bunch of other priorities in terms of dangerous intersections. And when I look at the roading and the transport ones that are not meeting their targets, is there a way that we can see the top 5 intersections for crashes, for example, and then have a program where we actually match budget to actually knowing that we're fixing some of those that are the top priority? Because at the moment it feels like...
Yanni, I completely get what you're saying. I wonder, Peter, whether you can just go and have a think with the team around how we can report on what they're doing additionally to try and get those levels, to be meeting those levels.
And it might be around public complaints like CSRs and like crash data or incident data. But I know that the staff produced a really good memo around things like odour, for example, when they were looking at some interventions around reducing odour from, I think, the sewer pipes in some areas, and it was quite useful to see. You could see clearly where the complaints were coming from and then see what the work program was.
It's almost a bit like the water leaks. I think Phil's talked about it, where Brent and the team are now targeting sort of the areas where they know they can make the biggest impact type thing. So
and instead of just fixing the Toby boxes one after another, if there's something underlying that's generating it, then you fix the actual problem.
Yeah, perfect. No, I'm completely agree. Okay, so we're good. I'm happy to move that. Mel looks like she's happy to second it. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much, Peter. And so if we can just, going forward, do that, the queries that are raised, if you report back like you did, that's fantastic, and it just closes that loop.
No problem.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great. Rightio. Next up, Russell. You're there, aren't you? I did see you. Great. So you're going to talk through our financial report.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning all. So yeah, this is the financial report for September. I'll just cover off a couple of salient points, take the paper as read, and then happy to take any questions following that. So we have an operational deficit of 22.2 million, which is 15.6 million lower than budget. The forecast for the end of the year is at this stage an increase on where we reported last month. So it's sitting at $10.2 million at year end. So where we're looking at what's changed, what's driving that, in its summary, high-level summary, revenues, we're expecting those to be up just under 6 million and expenditure down by about 5 million. So that's building consent volumes up. I think I've mentioned before we had higher growth in the rates strike than we anticipated, so we're expecting about $1 million extra in there. Extra dividend through from TransFund by about $400,000. A slowness, so this is offset by a slowness in the Hagley Park parking fees. Assurance costs, which I've mentioned before, they're going to be significantly under budget by almost $8 million. And we've lower costs in processing fees with solid waste and resource recovery, and also a slight underspend we're projecting for payroll. That's offset by projected overspend at this point, still work to be done, but in stormwater and wastewater, and also we've incurring extra costs in illegal fly tipping within the transport activity. And said that we had extra building and planning consent volumes, so extra revenues coming through, but we've incurred extra costs in attaining that, so that's offsetting it. So overall, that we're sitting at about $10.2 million for at the end of the year. At this stage in the capital space, and more will come in the report following me, we're projecting about $31.3 million underspend in the capital programs at this point. We expect most of that will be requested to be carried forward to the following year, but that's a separate exercise. We're just flagging that at this point. Just noting that this is the September report, so it's being quarterly. It has a bit more information than is normally covered. Things like treasury, rates debt, general debt, insurance, and also the activity summaries. So just covering off a couple of those. In the rates debt, overall, it's pretty static, if slightly up a small amount, the trajectory. I just say that's probably driven by a couple of things. One, the rates amounts are higher, and two, that the level of penalties was increased a couple of years back, so that may have had a bearing on there. Just also point out that that the team worked pretty hard on getting that down and working with ratepayers to encourage them to meet their commitments as much as possible. We'd rather engage with them than be sending out overdue letters and penalties. So that's generally the focus of the team. And section 9.2, just on rates rebates, pleasing to report there's about $5.6 million in the rebates has come back through to from that's monies paid by DIA. So the rebate was increased from $750 to $790, partly in that. Within the insurance, section 11, just point out a slight error there. The estimated cost for motor vehicles is $1,500. There should be one item below excess as opposed to zero generating that. Pretty much that's the items I wanted to cover, Mr. Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Hey, thank you for that. Two things from me. The first one would be noticeable about it's good that the insurance money is at the bank account for the treatment plant. That'll help things as well. It'd be good to see how that's reported. The other one was just around, are you able to just let me know, if you think about forecasting for the rest of the financial year, in your experience, when does the forecast kind of, the closer we get to the end of the financial year, the more reliable it is. but we're sitting at a 10 mil sort of projected surplus now. Are we sort of thinking by February, March, we'll have an overall flavour of what that number may look like? You know, give or take sort of $1 million. I guess I'm just keen to understand what's going to sit in there at year end.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a good question, and that is the focus of where it is. So I can give the financial report. It's what happened in September. So that's what, 23 days ago.
Yeah.
You know, the real focus is where are we going to be? So that is where we want to be. So that's the emphasis on the finance advisors and the business partners working with the businesses to get that as, I guess, as close to possible as early as possible. So if we need to make changes, we can. And you're right. Unfortunately, it's more solid the closer we get towards the end of the year. Yeah, and certainly we'd be better informed later in the year, February, March. We should be almost bang on, you would hope. We were surprised a bit last year. There was some stuff happened right at the end of the year, and so that was disappointing on a number of fronts, but we've made some changes and working with the business to be better informed. But like I say, the focus on working for the finance team, working with the business, is to really hone in on. So if there is an underspend, or I think we want to capture that as quickly as possible. Yeah,
that's good, because one of the things, I mean, I'm just thinking back to the annual plan discussion we had yesterday, and obviously if there's projected savings within the year that aren't carried forward, we should have a conversation at some stage, Bede and Russell, about how we can potentially carry them forward for those additional costs to reduce that rates burden as we strike the annual plan. So if you think about last year, I think it was a $20 million surplus, which you could argue is 3% on the rates. And it's all because it's retrospective. I would quite like us to start thinking about how we can be forward-looking as we land that annual plan, because it will help the organisation deal with some of those cost pressures. I'm not saying take all of it, because no one prudently would do that, but actually there might be a portion that we can carry forward for some of those costs that we weren't anticipating for next year. So can we do some work on, how that would time in with the annual plan? Because I think that will just help council in their discussions as we try and land it. Okay, sorry I've taken up too much time. Tyler.
Kia ora, just a quick one here. Point of interest to me, obviously, is recreation and sport. And the chair has actually joined the gym too, so he's a valued customer also. I just wanted to ask about the variance here, and in terms of the projected forecast, is this, in terms of from a historical perspective, is this a good read? This is referring to page 78. Is this a good read on the income, or has there been better days with the recreation and sports centres, particularly with the increased participation levels that we're seeing here?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So certainly in that space, last year we saw increased numbers driving revenue up, which was the main reason. So, one of those things that I mentioned earlier came in right at the end of the year was the higher revenues in that space. And we're seeing it again here so far this year, that increased numbers are driving revenue up. How that compares with other rec and sports centres across, I couldn't answer, sorry, I would need to come back.
Okay. Do we know what kind of customers come through the door? Nigel will probably be able to answer it in the unit at some point.
We encourage paying ones.
Maybe take that away as a bit of info for Nigel to...
What I'm wanting to hone in on is how much is the pool costing us and how much are we losing on it and or making profit off it?
Yeah. Well,
I'd love to see the variance within that.
So for context, when we went through COVID, our drops in revenue were quite significant because we had a fixed cost portion. So it was actually quite a financial impact on us. So they're quite good little units to have. Yeah.
Cool.
I can say that because I use Jelly Parks. Okay, so any other questions? Tyler, you happy to move this? Yep. And Mark looks like he's happy to second it. Thank you, Russell. All in favour? That's carried. Okay, Nikki, do you want to come up for the capital program report, and Paul?
Kia ora koutou, katoa. Good morning. We have a couple of points for you today to summarise the report. So we're delivering as per forecast with August, September and October on track. The project manager's forecast is coming down, So it's closer to the Program Management Office forecast of 510 million, so within 5.3%. The forecasting accuracy risk has now been closed, and that's following a steady improvement in this area over the last 2 years. FY25 forecasts are considered achievable for most of the areas of capital based on past expenditure reports. And lastly, 67806, so the treatment plant, the activated sludge. Once this project is established, we'll put that on the watch list. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yanni?
Thank you. And thank you for adding the improving Bromley roads to the watch list. I guess there just seems to be a problem in the way that it's being reported as being on track when it's not. So it's been like repeatedly delayed. So I'm just wondering if there's I'm just wondering how we set the project objectives and measure them. And I get that this is mainly around to do with finance, but it kind of gives the wrong impression when it says it's all green and it's actually being like delayed repeatedly. So I'm just wondering if there's a way, like I've got the original staff memo that's got the project objectives. Is there a way that we can measure against the project objectives rather than just the financials?
We are measuring against both financials and baseline, and you see on Bromley Roads that the baseline is June 25 for delivery, which is green at the moment because it's forecasted the same. So it's at the moment it's green on finance and delivery.
Right, but we were supposed to consult in time for the LTP 2024 on a plan, and we didn't. And then we were supposed to consult at the first quarter of 2024 on the plan, and we didn't. And we now still don't even have the plan to consult on.
So I guess is your question, Yanni, are the metrics that are being fed into the reporting, do they account for the points that Yanni's raised in terms of those other project milestones?
So the metric there that's being measured is project delivery complete. And so what the project delivery complete current forecast is June 25. Okay. Now, that does take into account other milestones to see whether we think that, or the project manager thinks that that's deliverable still at June 25, given that some of those other milestones have been missed.
Okay, so knowing we won't, I don't expect you to have the answer for that today. Can we take that away and have something circulated to council around the points that Yanni's raised? Because it would be good to understand that.
Yeah, like here's the date for the plan to be produced. Okay, we're running red. We haven't met it. So what do we need to do to make sure that we can meet that? Yeah, it just... Yeah, okay, I appreciate that.
Yep,
like, these,
so we've
yeah,
you got another question?
That would be good. The CWTP biogas, I was just thinking, given what we heard yesterday, and I don't quite know enough about it, but we're still producing energy at the wastewater treatment plant, and we were going to improve it. We were going to add some stuff so we could increase the amount of electricity that we use, and that electricity just going back to the plant. So is that connected into the new activated sludge reactor that we're doing?
Might be a Gavin question.
They're separate projects. So the biogas project had a number of drivers. One was we would eventually be able to produce more energy.
Yeah. Just for the plant itself though, right? Not for...
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
correct.
And the activated sludge will require more energy.
Yes, correct.
Is there a way that these two projects can be kind of tied in together?
That's what we're looking at currently. So obviously, we're looking at the opportunities to tie these projects together, and currently looking at the scope of the biogas project to reduce the overall cost.
Okay. Melanie?
Under the Parks Heritage Foreshore, there's the variance of close to 10 million for development funded neighbourhood parks. Greenfield, I was just wondering if that could be explained by someone.
That's largely land purchases, and when you're never sure when a land purchase is going to actually land. At the moment, we're forecasting 10 million above where the budget's been set, but it is funded through future years, so it'll be funded via a bring back.
Right.
So it's just really a timing of the budget and the actual purchases.
Great, thanks.
Good. Okay, so Jake looks like he's happy to move that. Yanni looks like he's happy to second it, but has a question.
Yeah, just so, and I can probably guess the answer, but I'll just ask it anyway. It was really good. We got the route selection report for the Wheels to Wings cycleway circulated on page 116. We've done the preliminary high-level draft route assessment for the Otakaro A1 route, and that was undertaken early, so decisions around Red Zone and Pages Road renewal could be further informed. But we've never been able to be given a copy, and repeated requests of it, but we've been refused. And I've been told I have to go to the Ombudsman to get, to appeal the decision. Given that we're the ones making decisions at a governance level, why can we not access that route selection?
So I think Jacob's sitting in the back row there. I don't know if you...
There's a briefing to the board on, tomorrow, I think, on that very subject. So it will be shared with the board at that point.
And will it be public?
No.
And why not?
For the reasons the Ombudsman laid out.
So we're making public decisions on things like Pages Road Bridge. But we're not able to...
Can you have the briefing tomorrow? And there are probably discussions you can have there. I don't understand enough about it, so I'm not that keen to have that conversation here when I don't know what we're talking about. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, Mark is here. And I don't know about... Is Kent coming or just...
No, he's got another meeting. He was hoping to be here.
No, that's okay.
And apologies from David Kennedy. He's overseas on holiday. We decided we didn't want to get him up in the middle of the night for the meeting. So
you're a kinder person than me, Mark. No, good. It's good to have you here.
So maybe we'll just take the report as read, and if we have a look at the drone footage, then I'll just point out a couple of things out of the report. So quite lucky to actually get the drone footage. It was taken last Wednesday. The previous couple of weeks we haven't been able to get drone footage because we've got some overprotective magpies on the site who actually physically attacked the drone and knocked it out of the sky. So looking here, we're looking at the northwest stand. Madras Street is on the right. You can see there that they've now got the precast concrete plats there for the seats to sit on. Steelwork is progressing well there. The roof, you can see there, the purlins are to the coaches and the media boxes up on the 4th floor. And as we come round, you can see just the brown frames there. Those are the frames that are actually supporting the roof trusses. You can see there's one of the sections of the roof trusses. They're put in 3 sections. One section is sitting on those towers, and then they'll put another section on this other side, and then they drop the middle section in the middle. Across the arena, there's 4 of those large towers. So this is the first one that they're putting in. And once they've got those towers in, then they pull those towers along to the next truss. So we're now coming up to Churum Street. You can see there they're starting to put some of the roof purlins. That's the members going across that the roofing will fix to. We're looking at getting the roofing loaded on end of the month. So they'll start putting some roofing on the southern end next month, and we'll also start the facade cladding in the south stand as well. So now moving around, you can see that first section of that truss going across there. It's held in place until it's all welded and bolted. Moving now round to the east end, Barbados Street on the right. Once again, you can see the seating plats there that we'll be fixing the seating to. And on the ground there, you can see the white frame there is the next frame that they're fabricating ready to lift up onto those frames. So those frames, just to give you an idea, they're about 15 metres high, so they're very sizable structural elements. Coming around to the north end and looking back there, you can see the stadium is really taking shape there now, and it's really making good progress. Just as I do note in the report, we are at the most challenging part of the project now. We are on program and on budget, but the roof is going to be where it's going to make or break the job, whether they keep to the the program. So it is a challenge. The first part took longer than they were expecting, but they have, like they have when they did the actual radial truss columns, as you do more of them, you learn from your mistakes, if you like. And so they're putting that in place to the lessons learned, and they're confident they can make the overall completion. But as I say, it will be a challenge.
Yeah, great. Okay. Hey,
And just a couple of other things just out of the report. So there is nothing that we really need to tell you about. And on the 29th, we're looking at having a briefing, just giving B6 Watpack's sustainability report. And also the exciting thing is we're going to release the cultural narrative designs for the facade and for the seating bowls. So we'll have the Ngāi artist will be there, and she can explain her designs. They will look really great.
Brilliant. Hey, thank you very much for that. We've got a couple of questions. Just the thing from me is, well done to the team on the videos. It's amazing how many people come up to me who I don't know and say, I love watching the updates that we're doing. So I just want to thank, I don't know who pulls them together. I'm assuming it's your team. So just thanks very much, and keep them coming, because there's a real excitement about this. And the more we keep communicating it, the more everyone's invested in it. So
Yes, Kent fronts those and does a great job. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Oh, really?
But it was an issue for us.
Yeah, so they now fly at 100 metres. So they're actually, the birds have left them alone. So.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so I've got Aaron, Sarah, Yanni, and then we'll, yep.
Yeah, just for my comfort, because I'm looking at the shape of that roof, and it goes back to a question I asked a couple of months ago around snow loading.
Yep.
Can I get something in writing around the modelling they used and what load it can take? Because I look at that shape and I can't see the snow coming off. And so are we heating or removing, or is it built to take the mother of all loads?
It's built to take the snow loading, yep. So
Okay.
we're not having to get up there and shovel it or anything. No, it's.
Can I?
And we did give a response to you that the arena is fully designed to meet the snow loadings of the New Zealand standards.
It's come through. There'll be an email from OCA.
Yes, but I'd like to see a layman's term of the modelling they use, just because I just that shape and the way that, because there are no poles through it, like all the loading gets pulled off to the sides, as everyone can tell by looking at it. So it's a stretch loading, and I just want to that's all.
I'm sure the engineers
I don't want to be the
doing.
Invercargill Council in a few years' time.
No, Aaron. I mean,
well, no one asked.
So let's not go there. So
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's very difficult to give a layman's sort of explanation for the how they've designed it. It is very complicated
I'm
engineering.
sure if we could arrange a time for someone to sit with you and go through it.
Yes, I would actually.
So let's do that.
Just at some point, but just happy.
So
to
can we?
have a look.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Sarah. Yeah.
Mine's at the opposite end, and it's on heat. So the likelihood of us having more hotter days is becoming ever more frequent, and so potentially the previous standards, whatever they might not be adequate for the next 50 years for the life of the stadium. So what modelling's been done on heat, because it's only passive cooling.
It is.
And it's going to be a bit like a hothouse. So what modelling's been done? What are the expected temperatures on, for example, a 25-degree day on the grass, halfway up and at the top kind of thing? That's modelling that's been done.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the overall from memory was about 2 degrees hotter than the temperatures outside, is what they're actually designed for. It does have louvers that will open, but
on the roof though.
But it's not air conditioned. It is a ventilated stadium.
Could we get some of that detail over the heat and what's expected and things like? Is it, so you're saying that it's likely to be 27 degrees on a 25-degree day?
Yep.
But that'll vary depending on how high you are and stuff too, and whether you're in the sun.
It will be.
If we could get that detail through, that'd be great.
Yep, and the timing of if you're having the games at night, then the temperature hopefully is dropping. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so so the question's been asked. Let's not design the temperature specs here, but we can get some information back on that. Yanni.
Thank you. Several questions. One is, thank you for making reference to triangle steel construction. I was just wanting to just understand what sort of due diligence is being done on subcontractors, given that the I think it was said that one of the directors was had a criminal conviction record of 1,160 convictions and over 1,000 jail sentences. So, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand. Les Orchard, who was appointed as a co-director on August 16th to Triangle Steel. So it got liquidated on September 5th.
I'm actually, no, I'm going to rule that out of order. I don't want to get into talking about individuals in this environment.
No, the question was around what due diligence is done on the suitability of subcontractors.
So
through you, Mr. Chair, we don't actually do due diligence on the subcontractors. Our contractors with the main contractor, B6 Watpac. The contracts with the subcontractors are all held by B6 Watpac. So all responsibility on their subcontractors lies with them.
Is there anything in our supply agreement with them around that? Or, I mean, I just find it,
Okay, so if you've got another question, I'm keen to move on from that one.
Yeah, is there any safeguards that we have around reputational...
The question's been asked and answered, Yanni, so if you've got a different question...
Sorry, is the answer no?
No, the answer is we don't procure it, yeah. I'm not sure how many times Mark can say it. So have you got a different question or I'm going to close it?
Yeah, so the other question I had was around the liaison group, the regular meetings, and that seems like a really good model, and I presume that's working well. I was thinking of whether there was any lessons learnt from that we could use for the wastewater treatment plant project, and just wondering in terms of what the attendance has been like at those meetings.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the attendance is very low, we'd have to say. We probably only get a handful of people at each meeting, which I guess is positive in itself because they don't have any concerns. The people coming often are coming for an update rather than raising issues. So.
Yeah, and is there a letterbox drop that's done to the community?
There is.
Before each one? I mean,
there is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just
on that, I mean, I know I've had people contact me with different things, and Mark, David, and the team are pretty quick to go back to them. So
and well done on that. That's really cool. And then I was just wondering, and maybe it's more a question for Venues Aotearoa, but previously they've said that they're looking at some sort of music venue. Is that being incorporated into the design? And is there a process by which we'll get an update on the balance of precinct that we've bought, but that isn't part of the actual stadium construction?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is all totally with Venues Aotearoa. The actual arena is designed as a multi-use arena, so it is designed for concerts as well as sporting events. But the actual the events and the activation of the wider precinct is with Venues Aotearoa and rec sports and events.
Right, but this was more around having a...
So the answer has been it's with Venues Aotearoa who are in here after morning tea. So have you got a different question? Because I'm keen to move.
Yeah, but in terms of the actual build,
yeah,
my understanding was there was going to be a discrete facility for hospitality around, like, not just the main stage, but actually something in the building itself.
We have 2 shell and core spaces that Venues Aotearoa can actually lease out.
Okay, cool.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Mark. So that's been moved by Kelly, seconded by Tim, but a question by Tim.
Yeah, look, just as a reminder, if the questions are really valid, but if you're really wanting good answers, perhaps send them through. And Yanni, yours is very valid. How about you send the question through to VO prior to them coming, so there's nothing as a surprise. It's a really good practice to have for councillors.
Okay, so we're nearly there. We've been doing so well all morning. So that's been moved and seconded. So all in favour? Against, that's carried. Thank you very much, Mark. That's much appreciated. So let's break now for morning tea, and then we'll come back and Melanie will take up CCHL. 11:15? Yeah, 15 minutes. Yeah.
you. That will help. It's way over here. No, thanks for coming in today with the annual report, and you've got a wee presentation. Did you want to present that now and then take questions afterwards?
We'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
And we're grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for having us again. Paul and Matt and I will just step through a very brief presentation and then open for questions. Just to get started, I think it's important to remind ourselves of the fabulous group of assets that the city owns. Fully owns Enable, Citycare Group, EcoCentral and DCO and RBL Property Limited, and of course majority owns the airport in Orion. The year that we're here to talk about, FY24, was a really challenging year for CCHL, and I think I'd just like to acknowledge the subsidiary companies, their boards, their chief executives and executive teams, and all of the people within their businesses who contribute to the outcomes that they've achieved. And I'd also like to acknowledge Paul and Matt and the CCHL team, because despite the challenges that were encountered within CCHL, particularly at the governance level, the results that have been delivered are very pleasing, and it is testament to the focus and the mahi of the subsidiaries and of the CCHL management. So Matt, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, really pleased to present the 2024 annual report and what we describe as a solid year of financial performance. Firstly, an apologies from me. The length of it is, I think it's over 140 pages, but I didn't write the accounting standards that took it to that level. And solid really is the right word to describe the annual report this year. I think 5 of the 6 operating businesses outperformed what we describe as their operating budgets and their financial targets in their own right, which is no mean feat in an economic environment that is challenging. I know just yesterday there was talk of a 75 basis points rate cut, which is really unprecedented in what is normal times. Happy with the results of the operating companies as a whole. Unfortunately, tax stole the show, and I've been here in front of you before talking about tax. So NPAT was nominally lower than projected at $68 million. This largely reflected the legislative change around deferred tax of $43 million across all the operating companies. Adjusted for this, NPAT was up at $111 million for the year on the $99 million in FY23. Just to briefly touch on a few successes. The number at the top left corner is $450 million, and we're really proud of that. That's an EBITDA that's up nearly $70 million year on year. Continued success at the airport, the bounce back post-COVID, the property portfolio with its strong portfolio of leases and development of new city and aeroplane connections to the world direct out of Christchurch. Orion's continued its investment and development and resilience of the network through FY24 with substation and lines upgrades. Enable's reached a period, what we describe as a mature asset these days, passing over 200,000 homes in Canterbury with an extremely high quality product. Citycare continued the diversification of its business based around its 4 operating businesses, including the first full year of Spencer Henshaw, and that continues to track positively to the original business case expectations. EcoCentral depots served over 500,000 customers, continued focus on diverting tonnes from landfill, whether for reuse or recycling, with minimal contamination, largely thanks to the very modern materials recycling facility that we have. And Littleton Port, despite trade volumes being softer than we wanted going in to the year and misaligned with our expectations, we've been here before where there were logistics and supply chain challenges in a number of places around the world, which made that business harder than expected, but year on year it contributed positively at the EBITDA level. Just briefly to touch on the parent. And so the subsidiary operating performance gave rise to valuations being up across the board. So that was approximately $250 million positive revaluation in the name of the parent.
and parent debt was steady with distributions at approximately a little bit over 80% of the parent's profit being paid out as a dividend, culminating in the $50.7 million distribution to council. And there's, I guess I've touched on it briefly in terms of the tax thing, but the return on equity is noted in the papers as being lower than desirable, really a combination of the valuations being up, and therefore the denominator in the equation is always a challenge. You're chasing your tail against very high quality, highly valued assets, and the tax that I mentioned previously around the deferred tax expense negatively impacting the bottom line at a group level at least. But in any event, the desire, and in line with council's expectation, there is a desire to increase the cash returns to council going forward as part of our contribution.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Quite obvious to all of you, but the value that we seek to create at CCHL extends beyond just the financial dimension, and so we've continued to evolve and mature our approach to value creation over the past 12 months. It's probably an unseen piece of work. It tends to find its way into reports rather than into the stories we'd like to tell. But in our annual report, we've provided an updated version of our value chain. And essentially what this represents is an acknowledgement from us that the subsidiaries or the ownership interest in the subsidiaries that we manage on your behalf has a very large economic, environmental and social footprint. And it's really important that as the provider of long-term essential infrastructure assets and services that we manage that in a responsible manner. So what we've sought to do in rethinking our value chain is be really clear about how we define our capitals, what we are working with or what we have access to in respect of those capitals, what we intend to do that. So what are we seeking to deliver in utilising those capitals, and if we're successful in pursuing those objectives, what outcomes we will achieve, and those outcomes do align to your own strategic framework and the strategic priorities that you set at the beginning of each council term. So this is going to be an iterative process for us. We will continue to evolve and mature, but we feel like we've made significant steps this year. And the annual report addresses some of the more specific initiatives. So I'll just, I won't go through each of these, but probably just highlight a couple of things. So one is we've produced and reported our first gender pay gap. And when we got that first piece of work back, it identified a gender pay gap on a base salary level at 4.5%, and that's kind of within the margin of error. So we could have sat back and gone, actually largely job done in that respect, but we took an executive decision that that's not the right approach, and what we should report on is total remuneration. And what that demonstrated is not only is the gap wider, but it clearly demonstrated that men had a greater opportunity to benefit from other allowances and loadings than women did across the group. So we're developing an action plan to address that, and be looking to initiate that action plan over the course of this year to work with the subsidiaries to help address that gap. The other thing that we've done, which is a material piece of work, is we're about to report our first set of climate-related disclosures. We'll do that next week. It does include the group emissions reduction plan, but goes well beyond that, because the climate-related disclosures have to talk to how we intend to manage our exposure to climate change, how we govern it, how we embed it into our strategy, how we think about risks and opportunities and how we mitigate those, how we address the current and anticipated financial impacts. So it's a comprehensive piece of work. It's only year one. It's another thing that will continue to evolve. And we are going to workshop that with you, I think, on November the 12th, we're down for. So that's probably the other substantial piece of work that we've completed this year in this space.
Yeah, so just looking forward, in support of the mandate from Council, we're going to be evolving our ownership approach and operating model to reflect that more active and responsible lens that you've directed us to have. What's going to be fundamental to that is the strengthening of the relationships with Council and with the subsidiaries and other key stakeholders. And in strengthening those relationships and having stronger connections across the group, we intend to build a deeper common understanding of the key strategic issues that we're facing across the portfolio. And, there's no doubt there are some confronting challenges on the horizon, and they do have potential implications for the city and the region. But, we have those on our radar. We do have time to carefully consider them. We do have time to work with you and with the subsidiaries to develop that deeper common understanding, so that we put ourselves in a position, armed with that deep common understanding across the subsidiaries, CCHL and Council, we put ourselves in the best position to make good long-term decisions that are in the best interests of the city and the region. So I don't think there's anything there to be overly concerned about, but it is important that we keep those matters at the forefront of our minds at CCHL, and that we manage them appropriately with you and with the subsidiaries, so that we're all able to hold hands and make good decisions in the fullness of time. And just before I conclude, I would also like to acknowledge Councillors MacDonald and Templeton, and the Deputy Chair of CCHL, Gil Cox, who's also in the room, and Bridget Geeson, who's an independent director of CCHL. Those directors have played a really valuable role in stabilising CCHL through the difficult period we had earlier in the year. And it's thanks to them and the management and the subsidiaries that we're able to report to you today with such a positive performance. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation, and there's a huge amount of work going on there in a whole range of areas. I think it's excellent to get this update. I just had a question about the climate statement. How often do those get produced? Is it every year or less?
Yeah, so as a climate reporting entity, we have an obligation to report every year.
Right.
The joys of us as a parent means that each of the subsidiaries has to produce a climate statement as well. So you can imagine everyone's gone from 0 to 100 in year one, and we've had to consolidate 6 entities who are doing their first climate statements into our climate statement, so it's a CCHL group climate statement.
Yeah.
And the approach is largely set by regulatory authorities, so the XRB and FMA. But the important thing for these statements is that they're not just a compliance exercise; they're actually strategic in their intent, and that's what we intend to try and lift and mature in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'll open up for questions. Does anyone have any questions on the report? Yanni.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing and for the presentation. I was particularly interested in the target not being achieved or only partially being achieved around. Sorry, it's on page 193, which is around the senior executive remuneration. So, yeah, it just says that. CCHL will ensure subsidiaries report annually the highest and lowest remuneration in each company. And then it goes on that there's been no agreed approach other than reporting the highest, a commitment to the living wage. So I was just trying to understand, get a sense of, and in the past, we've been told we have to wait for the annual reports to see what the trends are. But Are you able to tell us what's happening in terms of the trend of senior executive remuneration? And just mindful that there's been some media, for example, around the port, where there's been a significant increase in the number of people paid over certain bands at the highest end.
Yeah, I mean, I'll address the latter point last. Just in terms of the work we're doing in this space, so one of the things that became obvious to me when I stepped in as chief executive was that there was some clear intent to do more substantive work in strengthening pay equity across the group. And there were some kind of tools or levers that were identified. So, and one of which is the living wage, and the other was identifying the gap between the lowest and highest paid. What I found is that there's a reporting approach to those, which doesn't actually necessarily mean a lot. So I think this time last year, I was quite clear that it was going to be actually really difficult to actually close the gap in an environment where wages were increasing strongly right across the economy. So in absolute terms, the executive teams have probably seen something like 3 to 4% wage increases, and those are probably flattening off more towards 0 than 3 or 4 now, whilst broader wages went up by 6 or 7. But in nominal terms, the gap got wider, because when you're doing 3% off one number and 6% off a much lower number, you don't close the gap. So what we've done is we've sat back and said, okay, what does pay equity actually mean? And let's look at this in a more structured context, and how do we think we can introduce a range of levers to help close or to help strengthen pay equity or equitable outcomes from wages right across the group. And that's a piece of work that's in our current year program that we'll be coming back to you with our thoughts around that.
Okay, likely time frame for getting that work done?
Well, we put it in our fiscal year 25 work program, so and it's on the chief executive to deal with. So
the other thing that struck me in the report was that some of the directors' fees, we've got a chair of one board getting $170,000.
Yeah.
And it's CityCare, which is one of the smaller companies. So just, are you able to give us a sense of what's happening in that director fees space and why there seems to be such huge variances?
Yeah, so the reporting requirements are to report at a group level. So in the CityCare context, the chair of CityCare Group gets that number for his role as chair of the CityCare Group. The reality is he chairs 2 entities, CityCare itself and Spencer Henshaw. So when the Spencer Henshaw acquisition was made, there was a proposal at that time to have a governance structure which, from a CCHL point of view, we weren't that comfortable with. So we actually required CityCare to strengthen its governance of Spencer Henshaw for the first 2 years of the acquisition period, and that was to ensure a successful acquisition and execution and implementation of the revised strategy. So that time frame is coming to an end, and you'll see those directors' fees normalise in the next year.
Right, and the other one that struck out to me was the development Christchurch. I mean, 25k a year for directors' fees, 60k for the chair. What development Christchurch, like what?
Well, I can tell you, I'm the sole director of Development Christchurch, and I get $0, and it increases by the same amount each year.
So what? Oh, so this is from the previous year before the changes. Is that?
Yeah, sorry. I was pretty sure we know those numbers. There should be an RBL. No, there's not even an RBL number. No.
Got a page number, Yanni?
Yeah, that's page 200.
So that relates to the Adventure Park.
Oh, right. Subsidiary.
It's the investment in. So DCL gets no directors at DCL receive any income.
Yeah.
All of those relate to the Christchurch Adventure Park director fees.
Right.
Which is a standalone entity as a subsidiary of 54% owned by Development Christchurch.
Yeah. Still seems quite high for a small operation, but is it benchmarked against other companies?
I think you'd find that the directors of the Christchurch Adventure Park are well below the minimum wage in terms of the number of hours they've put into managing that business over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And just the final question from me was, and I really appreciate the fact that you're reporting more on diversity, particularly around gender, but we still don't seem to be getting much reporting around diversity outside of gender, around directors and makeup. And I mean, I've understood in the past that there's been work going on in that space, but again, I just don't really see where that's coming to.
Yeah, so that's one of those things that comes with a lag. So what you're now seeing or starting to see is the benefit of the emphasis on gender diversity that really started 2 years ago and strengthening that. And we continue to push hard in every round. In terms of ethnic diversity and age, I mean, those are proving to be more challenging because the skill set or the pool of people that have the required skill sets for our subsidiaries in that space is quite small. So what we've decided to do is that we'll undertake some targeted interventions. So we'll use the Associate Director Program as one tool that we can use to promote. We've done it with gender. We can do it in terms of targeting ethnic diversity and age in the future. So that's a much more effective tool than just requiring in each recruitment round that we pursue ethnic diversity as a matter of priority, because you can do it, but if the pool of people isn't out, then you can't find them. We're going to have to invest in growing that pool.
Tyrone, you had some questions? You have a question?
Kia ora, and thank you for the work that you've all done. And look, it's really, the stability that you've brought to and you in particular, Brian, since you've come on, it's been really greatly appreciated. just in terms of looking forward and stakeholder engagement, are you aware of, or are there any conversations happening with Ngāi Tahu or the local rūnanga just around joint title on reclaimed land, on LPC land? I mean, that might be a question for LPC, or is that just a high level?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, we are aware.
Yeah.
And there's probably some commercially sensitive matters that need to be discussed.
Right, all right.
Any other questions? I had a few. And a lot of them are really relating to the feature that was on about in the paper about Littleton Port, because there was quite a lot of information sort of revealed in that last weekend that a lot of people wouldn't know about. And I was just wondering on there, one thing that concerned me personally in there was the CEO's statement that he didn't know why LPC's performance had deteriorated so badly, which is a statement I don't know that a CE should be necessarily making. They should probably know. So did you have any thoughts on that or comments about it?
Well, I can comment on my relationship with the chief executive of LPC, and I can tell you he's done a lot of work to understand the challenges that the port has had, and what they need to navigate in order to execute the opportunity, which was a strong feature of that article, which is to grow the port in coming years and decades. I think you'll find that, and I can't speak to him personally in terms of how he approached the interview, but when he gets, when those kind of questions are put in front of him, he doesn't want to get into the a kind of naming and shaming, blame the past kind of exercise. So he tends to just park that with those kind of comments.
Right. Okay. And the other one was the comments also around talks of LPC with DP World that have sort of become, he'd said that during that interview and said it's the worst kept secret. Now, again, my question around that is, now that's out there, why are these things secret and maybe more of us not knowing about that? I mean, from a public point of view, it maybe doesn't look so good. I don't know.
Yeah, no, again, I can comment on that because I get it myself. Whenever DP World come to Christchurch and they ask for a meeting, the first thing people are going to ask is why you met with them and for what purpose. The reality is that, that's a company that is investing quite significantly across the logistics space in New Zealand. So it's not just about port operations. There's a lot that they are doing. And so there is a potential customer link between LPC and DP World, which is a perfectly reasonable and rational thing to discuss. As I said, what the CE was commenting on, which is the same thing I typically have to address, is that people see conspiracy when they see those meetings appear in your diary, and it's not the case.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Great. Well, we've got the resolutions there to receive the report, appoint me as proxy, and I'll agree to everything in the AGM. Who wants to read that? Tim, and we'll have and Kelly moved and seconded. All those in favour. Is anyone going to get a debate? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. Great. Well, thank you for coming in, and thanks for answering some hard questions there. So
May I have one?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to let you know that our chief executive process is proceeding very well.
All right.
And we expect to make an announcement shortly.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
All right, we've just got item 13. Is Linda here? Oh, Linda is there. Great. Yeah. So this is just the proxy for Christchurch NZ, and we've got Sarah. We've got those correct, haven't we? You'll be the proxy, and then Pauline will be the alternate. I'm happy to move those. Tim's happy to second them. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Great. Vini Zotatahi, do you want to come up to the table? Can we get a chair for Brent? There's a, yeah. You've made the effort to come in, Brent. You might as well sit with. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Great, thanks for coming in. And I think everyone knows everyone, don't they? Got Carolyn, Danny, Gil, and Brent Ford, who's on the board.
Caroline, Danny, Gil, and Brent. Okay, let me just start with a couple of sentences of introduction. Thank you very much for having us here. We think it's important that we report to you on our annual report, but also give you a glimpse into the future, because particularly this sector, it's all about what's happening in the future. You've got the material. I think Caroline and Danny will go through it reasonably quickly, not every word on it, but you'll get that material for you to look at. It's been a really good year for us. It hasn't always been as easy financially as previous years against target, but I think the team's done exceptionally well in terms of reinvigorating the city post the period that everyone went through post-COVID, etc. And we're now back full on song. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline and ask her to take us through the presentation. Then it will be open for questions. Caroline.
Okay, thanks, Gil. You all again. Look, we'll obviously move through both our FY 23-24 annual report highlights, as well as look to Q1 of 24-25, noting that we don't have a huge amount of time. So I'll just focus on some of those successes, but also some of those constraints that we see, particularly when we look back at FY 23-24 around some of those, the bit of volatility that we've had in the economic environment. So 23-24 obviously was a more challenging year when it came to our cost pressures, particularly with respect to those uncontrollable costs around asset management and maintenance. We've always flagged that throughout the year, those large increases when it came to utilities, the living wage and insurance particularly. But we'll get firstly into some highlights, because operationally it was a great year really. So you'll see obviously we've exceeded all of those targets, 386 events, 642,000 guests, which is awesome, against our target of 450,000. So the fact that our community is out there getting together, enjoying their venues, and those venues our city is so proud to own and we're so privileged to manage, is fantastic to see. And obviously we continue to have celebrating and sourcing local right at the heart of everything that we do. So 82% of our food was procured right here from Canterbury. And obviously now we've extended our reporting to reflect on the use of our third-party suppliers and contractors, so 70% as well. A few of those event highlights, it seems like forever ago really, but particularly if you see the amount of activity in the Christchurch Town Hall, for example, 246 events there. That's a high utilisation of that venue, which is amazing to see, and just reiterates the value in that investment from the city in restoring and repairing the Christchurch Town Hall. Just incredible. Again, Apollo Project Stadium, that venue has its constraints, but it has stood the test of time and it's certainly done us proud. So really getting much more diverse use of that venue. Great to see those Warriors sold out there a couple of times. It'll be awesome to have them back next year and obviously run out on the pitch at One New Zealand Stadium as well. And Wolfbrook Arena again, really high usage. So we are seeing great usage, great venue utilisation across all of our venues. And adding in that bit of mobile activity as well. So Sail GP was a fantastic addition to the year. And as we reflected on, I think in Q3 reporting was, in March 2024, we did 20% of our annual revenue in that 1 month. So pretty awesome. But most importantly, what does that do outside of the venues? So 41.2 million of indirect and direct economic contribution to the city in FY 23-24. Now that comes from visitation to the venues, so from out of town about 28 million, as well as what we directly procure from local region, so 1.72 million, as well as that 11.34 in direct contribution to local suppliers. So collectively, that's a really impressive number, and wonderful to see that event ecosystem coming from the venues. Sustainability has been a huge focus for us, and just to highlight some of those environmental sustainability successes, we've had an 11% reduction in our carbon emissions from our baseline in FY 22-23. That's predominantly around waste and energy. Our refrigerant reporting will come in the latter stages of next year, but refrigerant is quite a small proportion of our carbon emissions. We've been replacing all of the lighting at Wolfbrook Arena to energy efficient lighting. As of today, that's about 97% complete now. We've established a reporting and monitoring framework. We've increased our ticket levy at Wolfbrook Arena to offset those waste collection and disposal costs particularly. And we've started that design work on replacing the diesel boilers at the arena, which contributes about 39% to our overall carbon footprint. Community, again, just like celebrating and sourcing local, is at the heart of everything that we do. Great to see for 23-24 that we've exceeded those targets again, and quite significantly. So we have a target to support community individuals and groups to the value of about 100,000 a year. That was 184,000 in 23-24. Now, our ability to do that comes from what we can generate in terms of revenue. So really good to see that we can continue to make sure that the venues are accessible to all members of our community. Client and guest experience, another one of our strategic pillars. So again, our client NPS targets and guest NPS targets are well exceeded, which sets a great platform for the future, really understanding what our clients and our guests value, as well as where we can improve. And to our financial performance, so obviously we do have a positive variance there when it comes to our operating income. Sale GP was a great addition to the year, but you will see that our EBITDA is behind budget there, and we have talked about the reasons for that. But those material contributions to that behind budget EBITDA are that 54% uplift in insurance that added an extra $1 million to our insurance bill for 23-24. The living wage was obviously at 9.9%, another up close to 7% this year. And we had some earlier than expected repairs and maintenance required at the stadium. Now, obviously, we have an end-of-life report that informs, and we have a quarterly structural assessment. That end-of-life report informs essentially what we may or may not, based on a certain risk profile, need to invest in to keep that venue safe and operationally compliant. But we did have some things that came to their end of life earlier than expected, so we needed to invest that. And then our pre-opening stadium expenses. So we are continuing to meet all of those expenses, obviously without any revenue for the venue as yet. So I guess moving on to Q1 now, we take what we learnt in 23-24 and we take that into 24-25. What we are seeing is a slightly less volatile environment when it comes to those uncontrollable costs in the most. So when it comes to insurance, for example, we're seeing more like a 6% increase in insurance versus a 54% increase. So that's great, albeit coming from a much higher base, as well as utilities. You know, we had 25% increase in utilities last year. We're closer to 10. You know, so these things are starting to become less volatile, albeit those base costs are a bit higher. But as I've said, the living wage is also something that is continuing to, you know, to grow exponentially, really. And we have around 600 casual staff all paid the living wage, and that will grow to closer to 1,000 in the next 18 months as we prepare for the stadium. But what we are focused on is cost control, as well as focusing on revenue generation. Now, we don't want to do one thing and not the other, but essentially our focus is to generate more revenue, reduce our internal costs, and look to continue to reduce any support that we need from council. but we do acknowledge we've got large complex venues to manage, and some of those are older than others. But it certainly is our focus as we get into 24, 25, and always has been, but it's just been a little harder with the volatility of the economic environment in the last little while. So Q1, these highlights come before obviously submitting our formal Q1 performance report, but we thought important to talk to these now to give you a flavour of how the year is starting and shaping up. So again, we're really pleased to see the start of FY 24-25. So we've exceeded again those targets around event numbers, guest numbers, already 150,000 through the venues. We're continuing to procure 80% of our food locally, as well as just slightly ahead on those local suppliers and contractors. And similarly, pretty much in line with last year, so in totality across economic, indirect and direct economic impact, that's just over 7 million to the end of September. So again, great to see. And again, when it comes to community events and the value of those discounts, we are again on track to exceed both of those targets. Sustainability, this is consistent, but you'll see that we've now entered a new waste management partnership. We have waste management plans in place for all of our venues, and we're really pleased with that partnership, which commenced in October, and they'll continue to support us in diverting as much as we can with an 80% target from landfill. As I said earlier, 95, well, it's actually 97% now, I think, in terms of that lighting replacement, and now getting those sensors in to just make sure that we are being as energy efficient as we possibly can be. That monitoring framework for our refrigerants we will develop, and again, just continuing to plan that replacement of those diesel boilers. We won't look to do that until 26, 27 because it will involve closing the arena for some time, and until the stadium opens, we won't have anywhere to displace any of those events. So it is important that we just balance that. We do regular pulse surveys of our team, and we did reflect on the last one in our Q3 reporting. This time we did our pulse check, actually focused on staff safety. We've had increasingly challenging behaviour from in-venue behaviour as well as outside of venue behaviour, and we've just wanted to make sure that we have the support in place for our staff to make sure they feel safe, feel supported, and if they don't, they know the tools and methods that they can use to resolve that, as well as making sure that we are mitigating any of those risks as much as we can. But we've got to ask the question. So as much as we do have those concerns, 86% of our staff do feel safe working at our venues, which is really, really good to hear. It doesn't take our eye off the ball, however. And 86% of our staff would recommend VO as a great place to work. So we like to hear that. Obviously, that's great for our reputation as an employer, but also great to know that our staff feel good about where they're working. And also just tracking along really well in terms of those NPS targets. So just a quick highlight on our preparations in terms of getting ready commercially and operationally for the stadium opening, only 18 months away, which is awesome. So corporate hospitality, we're still seeing a really, really high demand for corporate hospitality. I think our waiting list for suites, for example, of the 23 suites that we have is around 250, say. High demand, and so really, really, really exciting as we get into market in mid-2025. We have just concluded our ticketing services RFP, and we are now partnering with Ticketmaster. Now, our Ticketmaster partnership also includes content guarantees, so that gives us some security around our entertainment content for the next 5 years as a baseline, which is really awesome, and we're excited about that partnership. And you would have already seen some of those partnerships that we are announcing around, obviously the Warriors long-term partnership, the Phoenix now committing to playing here in Christchurch. And again, all that does is building guaranteed content at the stadium. All that does is really build that commercial confidence, and it underpins obviously our corporate hospitality offering as well. Naming rights is obviously, we confirmed that in July. And we have a range of other sponsorships and partnerships in the market, including the likes of Porridge. We have established an internal operator program to make sure that we are operationally ready and commercially ready. Now that's made up of about 85 projects, so a fair amount to do, but we're confident that we're well prepared and we will be ready. And once we get real confidence around, yes, we have confidence now in terms of we are on track in terms of that opening date until we, I think about March, April next year, really lock that in. We'll be able to start thinking about announcing what that event profile might look like and some of those launch activities. But I guess what I think is important to flag is when we think about an event series, what we want to do is underpin those decisions by kind of 4 key principles. So one is, let's get as many members of our community through their venue as possible and as soon as possible. Let's get as many eyeballs on the city as possible. Let's generate the most regional impact we can from that event series. And let's highlight and showcase the flexibility and multi-use functionality of this amazing venue, because they're the things that we should be celebrating, and it's not too far away. So in terms of Q1, we are a little behind in terms of our operating income, but what you'll see there is the reason for that is we had a couple of forecast events, one of them being a multi-event that didn't come to fruition. Obviously, it's not an exact science, but you'll see there our focus around stringent cost control and making some fundamental changes actually has delivered us a positive variance to budget with respect to our EBITDA. We have also now worked through our reforecast for the year and with some targets that we're setting around reducing some costs, including some of our event-related costs. We're forecasting around a $1.3 million saving in terms of our costs this year. But we are seeing some still volatility around some of those costs. Utilities have come down, but the likes of the living wage has continued to go up. So that's where we're starting to see where we need to make some of those savings. And we are, albeit not included in these numbers, we're going to be reporting those separately, and you'll see that when our quarterly report comes in, is the stadium pre-opening expenses. We're now running 2 separate P&Ls, so we can actually start. It was muddying the water in terms of our business as usual performance. Gosh, it's never ending, isn't it? Sorry, everyone. And just looking at Q2, 121 events, close to 160,000 guests. So the remainder of this year looks extraordinarily strong, and we're delighted to see the demand coming through the venues. And even the Christchurch Town Hall there, 61 events in Q2. It's great to see. And we've already talked about that, and that is just what we've already talked about, which just reminds you all of how our financial structure. So event activity, event income, offsetting those costs of asset management and maintenance, of which council operating support is also a contributor. $6.57 million obviously this year in terms of those asset management and maintenance costs. So subvention, operating support, and then what we contribute from our revenue all goes into that total. So that is well and truly enough from me. So we'll take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very, very thorough.
I know.
Yanni.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Really amazing. And great to see so many different events and the high usage rate. These won't surprise you, as these are not new questions, but just sort of seem to be kind of a regular question. But given you've got unexpected costs at the temporary stadium, why would you not introduce a ticket levy to help offset some of that cost, given the cost pressures?
Yeah, so look, obviously those costs are not, well, they were unexpected in terms of the timing. They weren't unexpected in terms of whether they may or may not happen. Introducing a ticket levy now in terms of the number of events remaining at the stadium wouldn't have a material impact. It would contribute, I think we did the numbers, I think about 80,000 maybe in terms of an additional revenue line. So for the amount of work to go into actually getting that levy in place, it just wouldn't have the material impact. We are preparing, obviously, for a ticket levy at the new stadium. Now, what we will do in terms of that ticket levy, one, it will offset operational costs, and two, it will also cover our ability to have integrated ticketing with public transport to make sure public transport is free for any ticket holder at the stadium. So that should generate between about 700 to 1.2 million a year. So that's a material amount, but I think 1 year at Apollo Projects just wouldn't quite shift the dial in terms of those unexpected costs.
Right. As part of the fundraising or the funding of the new stadium, and thanks for giving us a list of kind of what you're doing. The one thing that seems to be missing is looking at selling off seats. I know the Court Theatre's doing it. I know many stadiums around the world do it. Have you looked at an ability for the people that, came to council and said, please build a big stadium with a whole bunch of extra seats, looking at some sort of mechanism why the public or others can actually give more towards this project around particularly using the seating or it just seems like an obvious thing to be looking at.
Yeah, look, I think what's important to focus on at the minute is revenue generation. And part of that revenue generation, of which we are seeing quite significant upside, is the membership program. And selling seats actually complicates matters because we'll have a membership program, but also we don't own the content. So it's quite a different proposition when we think about selling seats like the Court Theatre to raise money versus actually being able to sell a membership program and also based on what's not guaranteed content. Do you want to add anything to that, Danny?
Yeah, it is quite difficult from a stadium point of view. So let's say you're a Crusaders season member. You don't want to sponsor a seat per se or buy a seat, but that seat means everything to you. So when you go to the 7 games of Crusaders, you sit in your seat. So to have a default name on a seat is tough from a membership. Same with the Warriors. They sold a 2-game membership. They sold 8,000 members here as well. So it becomes a bit difficult with a transient venue hire system as well. Theatres, it does work really well. I completely agree. And I think it's an awesome initiative for the court. But from our point of view, how do we kind of get the most revenue out of that stadium, make it attractive to our venue hirers and let people invest with confidence, whether it's corporate hospitality or seats and bowls. So yeah, we have had discussions about it, but it does come with complications from a venue hirer and what their commercial proposition is, particularly membership, to be honest.
Right. And is there any other work happening? I'm just getting a bit confused about who's leading the discussions with our neighbouring councils, ECAN, maybe MPs around some sort of regional levy. Who's leading that work, and what's the best way for us to get visibility of it at a political level?
Yeah, I'm happy either way.
Look, I think that's really a council talking about the other councils in particular. That's a council to council. We're very happy to be supporting any initiatives that the council might take with other councils, but our role is not to get into that space where it's council to council discussions. And I guess there are 2 elements to that. There's ongoing operating expenses primarily, and there may even be some capital contributions, but they are certainly council to council discussions. We're very happy and have committed to support those, but we can't lead those.
Right. Because it seems to go, we approach them, they say, thanks, but we haven't been involved and we're not engaged in decision making and in the decisions.
Okay, so Yanni, so you got a different question?
Well, maybe it's a question of staff. Is there a way that we can get some sort of coherent framework around those approaches?
Yes, I think that's something we'll come back on. Yeah. We'll welcome.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
so
Thank you.
Mark, and then Jake, then Andre.
Yeah, mine was sort of teasing a similar point. I heard you mention ticket levy earlier around one New Zealand stadium. Is there any thought to potentially a Christchurch resident discount so that we basically have almost a levy on the out-of-towners to help contribute towards the stadium operating or capital?
Yeah.
Or is that something we need to follow up with our staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We've had various discussions with it. As Caroline alluded to, we have changed ticketing provider from TicketTech to Ticketmaster. So that only came into effect on the 1st of October, but we have had that discussion. Is there potential? There's a levy from a stadium point of view, which is separate to this conversation, but also if it was right to have, if you're based in these postcodes, it would not charge a levy versus out of city as well. So yeah, that's something that we have discussed that will carry on next year as well, and would close it off during this financial year 24-25. Whether it's viable, what are the workarounds, and probably what are the global trends, because people find a way to beat those systems. Yeah. So I think the levies are a no-brainer in terms of out-of-town residents contributing. Yeah, that's an interesting discussion that we want to know more about before we go. Is it viable or is it not?
Okay, Jake, and then Andre.
Hey, I went for a walk around the stadium a couple of weeks ago, and I looked at those retail spaces on the east side, and someone mentioned that their hospitality wasn't going to be allowed for in those spaces because presumably because of the food and beverage offering inside the stadium. But then I thought, well, I can't imagine who would take up the opportunity to fill those spaces out, and if we're wanting to activate the site, hard to imagine how you activate a site without food and beverage. Can you offer any commentary as to why that decision and how fixed that decision is?
So firstly, that decision isn't made. It's not fixed. The future use of those spaces is still up for conversation.
Cool.
What we've done is we've worked through a process to value those spaces, to understand in a commercial environment what would they be worth. They have some constraints. Obviously, they're on the east side. There's no car parking, that type of constraint.
That struck me too.
But I think what we now understand is where they kind of sit commercially, what they could be used for, and then think about what those principles are. Do we want to drive visitation? Okay. How do we want to? So no, those decisions are not made. Obviously, they are shell and core though. So the services and all those things are not in them. They were never intended to be. So up until such time as we sort of decide on and perhaps seek some interest from the market as to who might, like to use those spaces. That's kind of
cool. Oh, thank you for that. And just take it, I guess, from me, but I'm sure others will feel the same, that if we were to have a little bit of a lower commercial return for good, proper activation, then that would be something we want to look at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like maybe a bit of a crossroads there on the buy a seat, because buy a seat doesn't necessarily have to mean you're buying your space at said certain seat. But even the concept of someone having their name on a seat somewhere, I feel like it would appeal. So I guess my question is, if you'd still consider that. I mean, it's if you're buying your name on a seat, but not deciding where it goes, and that it doesn't give you the rights to sit there or whatever, it would still generate money, but make people feel invested in it. And surely, like I'd do it. A lot of small businesses would. A lot of people are just excited to stay, and they'd do it. And they could. I mean, it's just names, right? It's like, surely it's easy to do and would generate money.
Definitely an interesting one. And there's two sides to it as well. I mean, you kind of imagine Gil buys a seat. So I'm a Crusaders season member or a Canterbury Rugby one, and I love my seat. It's really important to me. That's the top reason why people are members. They feel a connection to that part of a stadium. And if you try and move them, it's problematic. So, the flip side to that comment is, if it's got Gil Cox on it, and I turn up as a Crusaders member, it's kind of a little bit.
But I'm not talking about it reserving your space.
But the name on the seat.
So I've had the same, for example, Warrior season ticket for a few years now, same seat. I couldn't care less about what business name's behind me or what name or who is, still sponsor their name to help support the stadium. That's sort of what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily have to be about who's sitting where. But just to have your name somewhere in that stadium, I feel would mean a lot to people.
Yeah, look, I think what we do is, obviously that's on the one consideration. There might be other, it could be pavings outside. It could be, I guess it's also really important that we understand the full financial model, and what we want to do next year is actually take you all through the financial model, which will be about March, April, where we'll have a bit more certainty. And what you'll then appreciate is, I think firstly it's really important to understand the need, because and similarly with the discussions, I guess, and considering what that council to council conversation looks like is, let's first identify the need, if there is one, because there are upsides, and in terms of the commercial model, it looks strong. And even based on the current forecasts, it washes its face operationally, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's important that we get it right instead of, I think it's important to look at all these ideas, absolutely, but let's pick off the best ones.
Yeah, and probably just to close that one off, I think virtual is a really big opportunity. So yeah, physical absolutely as well. But for example, to be a member of One New Zealand Stadium and you're member 14, for example, that connection is really important. You get benefits and you're kind of a foundation member. So we've got a few as part of our financial modelling that kind of fall under that as well. So your virtual, without a doubt, there will be a connection where people can join. And then physical, we can kind of dig into it a bit more as well.
I guess what I'm saying is like around a stadium, you might have a business who has sponsored that sign at that part of the stadium, whatever. I guess what I'm saying is there's 30,000 individual sponsorship opportunities. So it might be that some businesses just want their name on a small part of, 500 seats or whatever it might be. I just sort of feel like there's 30,000 opportunities there. And it's like, whether you need it or not, why wouldn't you take that? This is, I guess, what I'm trying to...
I guess we've got to work through the modelling, which is, if that is something we progress, what are the possible compromises? Because there could be some. So there are obviously other parts of the stadium that we are looking at sponsorship opportunities, like stands, for example, like lounges, obviously other advertising that's not in scope at the minute. So it's not off the table by any stretch. I think we've just got to work through it as an option.
Thank you.
So I guess what you're hearing from that is there are some ideas that the team would like at least talked about when we come back. So that's the point of these. Does anyone else have any more questions? Yanni?
So I was just wondering, it'd also be really good at some stage you can understand what's happening with the balance of the precinct. Like, there's obviously been, land that we've acquired, and I just don't quite understand what the strategy is around that whole site working well together, or what the other possible development opportunities might be.
Look, we're really open to having that conversation with council around what those the future of those sites could be, because we'd love to obviously be part of those conversations to be able to create that entertainment precinct. So that we'd love to have that conversation.
It just seems while we've got work and contractors doing stuff, it would be better to have those conversations earlier rather than later, so that if there was any synergy with the contractors, it would make a lot more sense. And the final question from me was just in terms of the naming rights. Has there been any discussions around the information and the data from people that attend? Like, I know in the past when we looked at sponsorship for the Tūranga with Spark, one of the considerations was access to the data of the people that were attending.
Yeah, definitely. We've done quite a bit of work. I mean, it does sort of come back to who opts in. So if you go to One New Zealand Stadium, you use the Wi-Fi when available, and what rights you're happy to hand over. Just like when you buy a ticket, similar concept. You're happy to get remarketed. So yeah, there will be data available. It just depends on what the consumer's comfortable with. I mean, how we kind of repurpose that as well. But it's a big opportunity from a connectivity point of view.
Maybe not today, but can we get some information?
Yep. So I think that it's good points have been raised, and if you can just bring it back when you're next in. Andre, did you have another question? Then I'm keen. Tyler's going to move it and Phil's going to second it.
I've just seen Eden Park realise that they're too limited for how many concerts they can have. They've gone from 0 to 6 now. 6 is not enough. Like, a core stadium in Sydney's just gone from 6 to 20. I mean, I've been wondering this for years, if we've got enough, basically. Like, if those moves and those stadiums made you start to think more about this?
Look, we've got the ability to, we've got 15 under the designation at the minute, and that's 6 loud and 9 medium, and then an unlimited number under that. So we're pretty confident that that's enough at the minute. That's actually quite generous, and it's probably the most generous by way of numbers across New Zealand.
Yeah. I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, if Eden Park's got a limit of 6 and they weren't able to get Taylor Swift or whatever because of that limit, like, could Taylor Swift have fit into one of those 9 not so loud? Is what I'm trying to get me head around.
I don't know if Taylor Swift didn't go because of that limit. I think it wasn't about that. You can always ask for an exemption.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if that was, would Taylor Swift been allowed here because we've got those 9 quieter that are allowed? Or would that still have been over that decibel limit and then we're in sort of the same spot as those other stadiums.
It's probably more whether it's financially viable for the promoter, but if it is and they come here, they can make the noise work. So the decibel is really important. It's really easy what they have to do from a sound desk point of view.
Yeah.
But you're right, if Eden Park are at capacity, a promoter has to move somewhere with 15 concerts. That's a great competitive advantage for Mōtutahi Christchurch.
Yeah, but would they, if they thought there's a decibel limit and we've got this band, would that potentially put them off coming and having to make it work within those decibel limits and those 9 instead of the 6?
Yeah, it just varies by act, to be honest. A promoter absolutely would make that call and go, does it stack up, and can we keep to those decibel limits as well? And that would just be by type of musician and how particular the act is.
Yeah.
But you're right, would it be on the table? Potentially. I wouldn't think it would be a showstopper, though.
Okay, so we're good. I think we're keen to move on. So it's been moved and seconded. Thank you very much for coming in for that. It's really useful. Yes.
Look, I just want to reflect on what Venues Otatahi is about, and it's about providing people with great experiences. That starts with our staff on the ground, and it builds up through various levels of casual staff to management people through to the senior management team. And, from a board perspective, we just want to acknowledge the work that every one of those people put in and the focus they've got on giving people a great time. So I just think we need to acknowledge that and thank those people, because they give up a lot of time to do this, whether they're a casual staff or whether they're at the management team.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, so that's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much for that. And Gil, don't go away. I think you're up next. With a different hat on. So. Great. Great. Thanks for coming in. Cheers. Phil, you go first? Now, I think. Yeah. Just before we begin, the Mayor would like to say something.
Yes.
Gil. All right, can we just have Jake?
Pay attention.
Jake and Andre, get started.
Hey, today, just everyone, for everyone's information, today's the last time we'll see Gil Cox at this committee in his capacity as Chair of Transwaste. This is because, as many of you know, he is retiring from his role as Chair of Transwaste. Gil was appointed as the Transwaste Chair in 1999 when his hair was a different colour. And I probably helped, when I was on there for 3 years, probably helped change it. Anyway, he has served for 25 years, unbelievable. He has had continual support from the 5 council shareholders and the 50% shareholder Waste Management New Zealand right throughout that time, which shows how much respect and trust he has. I've known Gil for many years, and it's been an absolute pleasure to serve on any board that Gil has been a part of. As Chair, he has always been kept up to speed, as well as keeping his directors up to speed. It's a great relationship builder and maintains a no surprises approach. As well as Transwaste, Gil has also served, on many boards with the council, Christchurch City Holdings, Te Kaho Project Delivery, Venues Otatahi, to name a few. He's on a lot more other things as well. We are very lucky to have his expertise across the range of council areas. On a personal level, Gil shares my passion for motor racing, and I've really enjoyed seeing him out at the track over the years. Gil, it has been wonderful to work with you. On behalf of the council, I'd just like to say how much your contributions are appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil, and thank you to all of you for trusting me so much to do some of the things I've done, and particularly, and I never thought I'd ever say this, to trust me with your waste. Because it's something we try and say at Transwaste all the time. It's not our waste. Well, a tiny little bit of it might be, but it's your waste. And people need to understand that we're dealing with your waste. And one of the things we've tried to do in recent years, and I am going to mention a person that's really important in this, and that's Gareth James. But Gareth and I decided some years ago, quietly over a coffee, I think it was, because neither of us drink, we decided that we had to change the narrative a bit around waste, from being we just deal with your waste to what we do is take waste as a raw material and try and extract the last bit of value we can out of it, while we are a great protector, if I can call it that, of waste and emissions. So that's the change you're seeing in the narrative, and it's been a real privilege to be involved in an industry that I thought I would never, had no aspirations to be involved in at the time, for so long, and just see the development that's taken place and see the passion of the people that work looking after your waste. So thank you for the trust you've put in me over the years, and I'll still be around. Thank you.
So do you want to touch on your annual report? The Mayor is happy to move it, and Tyrone looks like he's happy to second it. Do you want to run through what you'd like to? And then...
No, Sam, I don't, because there might be things in there I don't know. We've got a session with Christchurch City Council with the management team of Transwaste and myself, and maybe one of the other directors, on the 5th of November. And what I'd rather do is use that time to go through the annual report and also, our current year's process or progress to date, and where our forecasts are looking for this current year. So I think that would be a much more comprehensive way of doing it, if you're happy for that to happen. But I'm happy to take questions on the annual report.
Well, it's been moved and seconded.
One question.
Phil has a question. Yep.
Gil, in the paper the other day it said, heavens to Betsy, we're 50% through at Cape Valley. I know that's not right, because there's a shed load more land in what you and I used to call Cape Valley 2. So people shouldn't worry that in 20 years we're going to be in strife, because we're not.
No. Look, just to fill that in, and I took the opportunity, which I'm one of these people who believe sometimes you can have a positive relationship with the media, and I took the opportunity of making sure that it was very clear, both at Christchurch press level, or national media if you like, and also at the local North Canterbury media, which is quite important as far as Transwaste is concerned. Where we are, we've got a consent that lasts on the patch of 37 hectares we are disposing waste of at the moment, into at the moment. We've got a consent that lasts till 2039. We will probably have a little bit more space in that. We might look to get a consent extension for a year or two, the way things are going. We are halfway through filling that 37 hectares. We own 1,300 hectares, and in that 1,300 hectares are two more valleys. If you're in the States, they call them canyons. Two more valleys that we can, that are suitable for putting waste in, that are under exactly the same geological structure as we've got now. So it would be the same system. The first one will give us about another 60 years, and the second one about another 70 to 100 years, if we were to go down that track. Both of those would have to be consented in due course, so there's no guarantees about that, and we should go through the full consenting process. But the stories we read from others that are trying to consent landfills in Canterbury, that Canterbury's running out of landfill space, no. That's the very reason, one of the reasons that Cape Valley was chosen. It gave us a long runway for dealing with your waste.
And just one other, is it still roughly, because it was when I was on Transwaste Board, about 18% of it's what I'd call red rubbish and the rest is just contaminated dirt? Is it still around about those numbers?
Yeah, it exactly. It's about 18-19% this year, and that's what you would see, the waste that you put out at the gate that ends up that's not diverted, that ends up at Cape Valley, is about 18% of the total waste in any 1 year that goes into Cape Valley. Around about, let me get these numbers right, about another 15% is what we would call special waste. That's waste that needs special treatment, and that can range from medical waste through to contaminants and various things that need special treatment, largely coming from industrial or commercial purposes. The remainder, there's about another variable amount that's often around 10% of contaminated soils, and that's the number that we're singularly unsuccessful in budgeting and forecasting, because it depends on what projects are going to start in the city, because it's largely contaminated soils, but it's how those developers then treat that soil. They could leave it on site and just cement it, cover it, or they could have to take it off site, and therefore it largely will come to Cape Valley. If you think about contaminated soils, it's not exclusively, but you think about it as potentially asbestos, in some asbestos in those soils. Very low level of contamination, that will come to Cape Valley. The balance of what I'm talking about is commercial industrial waste. That's by far the greatest, 70% of what we take as commercial industrial waste.
Okay, thank you. Kelly had something, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Gil, thank you. Currently, you're capturing methane and powering 4 generators,
yes,
which produces enough power to power some 4,000 homes. I understand that there is a potential to power 8,000 homes, double that. How is that work progressing to move that forward?
Can I say things that I probably shouldn't say?
No, probably don't.
Yeah. Bearing in mind, I guess, Kelly, that you might have missed it at the beginning. Gil's, they are coming back to do a more in-depth session with us as well.
Okay.
So
And we will cover that. But look, we're constrained because of a main power line at the moment to 11 kV. We can only punch 2 megawatts, just over 2 megawatts down that 11 kV line. We need to get a lot more. They've kept promising that as part of their wind farm development. That's been going on for 18 years. Nothing's happened. We are probably going to go down the track of building our own line so that we can get to the 8 megawatts, potentially going into the national grid, though some of it could get diverted to other uses, such as our own electrification of our own fleet, or even hydrogen production.
Well, that's great.
I'll talk a lot more about that on the 5th.
Very glad you're looking at that.
Great, thank you, Gil, for that. And that's been moved and seconded. And I guess just to reiterate what the Mayor has said, which is, we really value you being part of the Christchurch City Council family. And I think in a lot of times you've really stepped into the fold when we've needed it. And this is probably another really good example of something that's run really well with your leadership. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you. And just watch which bin you put your waste in.
Yeah. I now understand why Phil really enjoyed that board. Not many people enjoy rubbish. So that's... Yeah. Okay, so we'll move. That's moved and seconded. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thanks very much. Cheers. So now we'll move into public excluded. I'm happy to move that, and Mel's happy to second it. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. And we'll just take a moment to clear the room.